My sister's son looked me dead in the eye, shoved my graduation cake off the table, and watched it smash onto the hardwood floor. As the white frosting splattered across my shoes, he laughed and said, "Daddy says you are used to eating leftovers, so eat it off the ground like a dog." The entire table of 30 guests erupted in laughter. My brother-in-law Brad slapped his knee in amusement. My sister Jasmine just sipped her wine. I looked at my parents, waiting for them to reprimand him, but my mother just sighed and said, "Clean that up, Keisha. Do not stain your sister's expensive floors." I did not say a single word. I did not scream. I did not cry. I simply took a napkin, wiped the frosting off my heel, turned around, and walked out the door. That evening, my mother sent a text to the family group chat saying, "We have decided to cut ties with you until you learn to take a joke and apologize to your nephew." My sister liked the message. I poured myself a glass of vintage wine in my penthouse apartment, opened my laptop, and replied with one sentence. "Understood, I am removing my name from every loan and asset tomorrow morning." By midnight, my phone screen was lighting up with 73 missed calls. Before I tell you how I dismantled their entire lives in 24 hours, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been the family scapegoat who finally fought back. I am Keisha, 32 years old, and for my entire life, I have been the invisible wallet for my family. Growing up in Atlanta, the dynamic was clear from the day I was born. My sister Jasmine was the light-skinned, green-eyed golden child who could do no wrong. I was the dark-skinned daughter who had to work twice as hard to get half the recognition. My parents Calvin and Bernice were obsessed with appearances. They wanted the world to see a perfect upper-class black family, but they did not have the money to fund it. That burden eventually fell on me. They think I am a glorified administrative assistant because I never correct them. In reality, I am a corporate crisis manager. When Fortune 500 companies catch their CEOs embezzling funds or facing massive PR scandals, they call me to clean it up. I bill $400 an hour, but to my family I am just Keisha, the worker bee who lives in a small apartment and drives a used Honda. The incident that broke me happened last Sunday. I had just defended my dissertation to earn my PhD in economics. It was a milestone I had sacrificed sleep, relationships, and sanity to achieve. My parents said they wanted to throw me a celebratory barbecue at Jasmine's house in Buckhead. I should have known better. When I pulled my beat-up Honda into the driveway, I saw the glistening white Range Rover and the Mercedes G-Wagon parked out front. Both of those cars had my name on the financing paperwork because Brad had a credit score below 500 and Jasmine had maxed out her cards years ago. I walked into the backyard carrying a custom cake I had paid $300 for. It was beautiful, decorated with gold leaf and the words Dr. Keisha. But as I stepped onto the patio, I realized this was not a party for me. It was a showcase for Jasmine's new outdoor kitchen. The guests were her friends, her neighbors, and the judgmental church ladies my mother tried so hard to impress. They were all dressed in white linen, sipping cocktails, and talking about summer homes in the vineyard. "Oh, Keisha, you are finally here," Jasmine said, barely looking up from her phone. She was wearing a designer sundress that cost more than my first car. "Use the side gate, please. We do not want you tracking mud through the main house. The housekeeper just left." I swallowed my pride and walked around the side. When I set the cake down on the dessert table, no one clapped. No one said congratulations. My father was busy telling a deacon from the church about how Brad was a financial genius who worked in stocks. In reality, Brad was a day trader who had lost more money than he had ever made, and he was currently living off the allowance I transferred to Jasmine every month under the guise of helping out. I stood by the table feeling like an intruder at my own celebration. That was when Leo, my 10-year-old nephew, came running past. He was a miniature version of his father, entitled and cruel. He stopped, looked at the cake, and sneered. "Is that chocolate?" "I hate chocolate," Leo whined. "It is red velvet, Leo," I said gently. "It is my favorite." He looked at his father Brad, who was holding a beer and watching us with a smirk. Brad gave him a subtle nod. Leo reached out his hand and with a deliberate forceful shove, pushed the cake box off the edge of the table. It hit the deck with a wet, heavy thud, the lid popped off and the beautiful cake was smashed into a pile of red crumbs and white frosting. Frosting splattered onto my shoes and shins. The chatter in the backyard stopped instantly. Leo pointed at the mess and laughed. Oops, but Daddy says you are used to eating leftovers anyway. Eat it off the ground. You look like a dog when you are mad. The silence that followed was deafening. I looked at Brad. He was laughing so hard he had to hold his stomach. I looked at Jasmine. She rolled her eyes and signaled for a waiter to come over. Kids will be kids, Keisha Jasmine said dismissively. Do not make a face. It was just a cake. Honestly, it looked a little cheap anyway. I turned to my mother and father. My mother Bernice adjusted her hat and frowned at me. Keisha grabbed some paper towels and cleaned that up immediately, she said, her voice sharp. That frosting has red dye in it. If it stains your sister's new hickory deck, you are paying for it. My father took a sip of his drink and looked away, pretending he saw nothing. Something inside me snapped. It was not a loud snap. It was quiet, like a high-tension wire finally giving way. For years I had co-signed their loans. I had paid off their credit cards so they would not be embarrassed at the country club. I had paid for Leo's private school tuition because Brad said he was having a slow month. I had let them treat me like the help while I funded their lifestyle. I looked down at the ruined cake. I looked at Leo, who was sticking his tongue out at me. I looked at my family, who saw me as nothing more than a resource to be used and discarded. I did not pick up a single napkin. Instead, I reached down, took a clean cloth napkin from the table setup, and slowly wiped the frosting off my shoe. I dropped the dirty napkin right on top of the smashed cake. I am leaving, I said. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. You cannot leave, my mother hissed, grabbing my arm. We have not taken the family photos yet. You need to stand in the back so we can get a shot for the church newsletter, and you haven't given Leo his gift. Let go of me, I said. I pulled my arm away and walked toward the gate. Behind me I heard Brad yell, "Yeah, run away, loser. Don't forget to transfer the money for the car note tomorrow." I drove straight to my real home. I do not live in the suburbs. I live in a penthouse on the 45th floor of a luxury building in downtown Atlanta. My family does not know this address. They think I live in the same complex I lived in 5 years ago. I handed my keys to the valet, took the private elevator up, and walked into a sanctuary of silence and glass. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat looking out at the city lights. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was the family group chat. My mother had sent a long text. It read, Keisha, your attitude today was unacceptable. You embarrassed us in front of the deacon and Brad's business partners. We have discussed it as a family, and we are deciding to sever contact with you for a while. You need to learn humility. Do not contact us until you are ready to apologize to Leo and reimburse Jasmine for the cleaning fees for her deck. Jasmine reacted with a heart emoji. Brad added, and do not think this gets you out of the car payment. If that payment is late, it is on you. I stared at the screen. They were cutting me off. They were threatening me with silence, thinking it was a punishment. They had no idea that they were holding a gun to their own heads. I set the wine glass down and opened my laptop. I logged into my secure banking portal. My hands hovered over the keyboard. I was not just a sister or a daughter anymore. I was a crisis manager, and I was about to create a crisis they would never recover from. I pulled up the spreadsheet I had updated monthly for the last decade. It was titled Family Liabilities. Item 1, the mortgage on Jasmine and Brad's house in Buckhead. Value $1.2 million. Primary borrower Brad. Co-signer Keisha. Status: Brad's credit score is 520. Without my co-signature and income guarantee, the bank would never have approved the loan. The terms of the mortgage had a specific clause I had inserted years ago, a guarantor withdrawal clause. It allowed me to withdraw my backing if the primary borrower missed a single payment, or if I chose to pay a penalty fee to exit the contract. Brad had missed the payment date 3 times this year, and I had covered it quietly. Not anymore. Item 2, the auto loans, the Range Rover, and the G-Wagon. Both leases were under my name because neither Jasmine nor Brad could qualify. I was listed as the primary leaseholder, and they were listed as authorized drivers. Item 3, the business loan for Brad's investment firm. He had needed $50,000 to start up. I had loaned it to him directly with a notarized promissory note that was payable on demand. He had never paid back a dime. I typed my reply into the group chat. Message received. I will respect your wishes to sever all ties. Since we are no longer family, I will be removing my name from all financial obligations effective tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Enjoy the silence. I hit send. Then I blocked them all for the night. I slept like a baby. The next morning, Monday, I woke up at 6 a.m. I went to the gym, showered, and put on my favorite power suit. By 8 a.m., I was sitting in the office of my personal banker. "Good morning, Ms. Williams," he said. "What can we do for you today?" "I need to execute the withdrawal clause on the mortgage for the property on Peachtree Road," I said. "I am also reporting 2 vehicles as unauthorized for use by secondary drivers. I want them repossessed and returned to the dealership by end of day." The banker looked at me surprised. "That will trigger an immediate demand for full payment on the mortgage, Ms. Williams. The interest rate will reset to current market rates for subprime borrowers if they cannot refinance immediately. That could jump from 3% to over 18%. "I know," I said, signing the document. "Do it." Next, I called my lawyer. "Send the demand letter for the $50,000 promissory note. Give them 24 hours to pay in full, or we file a lien against their personal assets." By 10 a.m., I was sitting in my office overlooking the city when my assistant buzzed in. "Ms. Williams, your office phone is ringing off the hook. It is a woman named Jasmine. She says it is a life or death emergency." I looked at my personal cell phone, which I had unblocked just to see the damage. 73 missed calls. Voicemails were piling up. I told my assistant, "Tell her I am in a meeting. And if she calls again, block the number." I checked the notifications on my banking app. At 12:15 p.m., Brad tried to use the credit card I paid for to buy a client lunch at the Capitol Grill. The transaction was declined. I smiled, imagining the look on his face when the waiter came back with the card. At 1 p.m., I received an alert from the car tracking service. The G-Wagon was currently parked at Brad's golf club. I forwarded the location to the repossession team with a note, "Priority pickup." Then the flying monkeys started attacking. My mother, realizing I was not answering, had activated the church network. My phone started pinging with messages from Auntie Sarah, Sister Patterson, and even the pastor's wife. "Keisha, how can you do this to your flesh and blood? Your mother is sick with worry. God does not like ugly Keisha." They were trying to shame me into submission. It was their classic move. But I was prepared. I opened a folder on my phone marked Receipts. Years ago, I had taken screenshots of a group chat Brad had made with his frat brothers, where he made fun of the church ladies. He had called Sister Patterson a loud-mouthed old hag and made fun of the pastor's cheap suits. I selected the screenshots and sent them individually to every single church lady who messaged me with a simple note: "Before you judge me, you should know what my brother-in-law really thinks of you." The silence from the church ladies was instantaneous. I knew that within the hour the gossip network would turn its full fury on Brad and Jasmine. At 3 p.m., the first real domino fell. My sister Jasmine sent a text that broke through the wall of noise. "The bank just called. They said our mortgage payment is jumping to $9,000 a month starting immediately because you pulled your name. We cannot afford that. Fix this now, Keisha." "This is illegal," I replied. "It is perfectly legal. Read the contract you signed. You wanted me out of your life. I am out." Then Brad called from a number I did not recognize. I picked up. "Listen here, you little witch," Brad screamed. "They just towed my car in front of my golf buddies. Do you have any idea how humiliating that is? I am a vice president of a firm. You are ruining my reputation. You ruined your own reputation when you decided to treat your financier like dirt, I said calmly. And by the way, Brad, since you are walking home, you might want to check the ground. Maybe there is some cake down there you can eat. I hung up. But I knew this was just the beginning. Brad was desperate. And desperate men do dangerous things. I saw a notification pop up from my credit monitoring service. Someone was trying to access my social security number to open a new line of credit. The location of the IP address was my parents' house. They were not just angry anymore. They were trying to commit a crime. I picked up my office phone and dialed my private investigator. We have a situation, I said. I need you to pull everything you have on Brad's business dealings. I think he is cooking the books, and my family is about to help him commit fraud. The investigator replied, I'm already on it. You are not going to believe what I found in his trash last night. I leaned back in my chair. The sun was setting over Atlanta, turning the sky a blood red. They wanted a war. They wanted to humiliate me. They wanted to erase me. But they forgot one thing. I fix disasters for a living, and I was about to become the disaster they could not fix. The silence that followed the crash of the cake was heavy and suffocating. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the backyard, leaving only the humid Atlanta heat and the smell of smashed sugar. I stood there, my shoes sticky with frosting, and I looked at the people who were supposed to be my safe harbor. I looked at my father, Calvin. He was a man who stood in the pulpit every Sunday and preached about respect and family values. I waited for him to stand up. I waited for him to discipline his grandson. I waited for him to defend his daughter. Instead, he cleared his throat, lifted his glass of iced tea to his lips, and deliberately looked away toward the fence line. He was choosing blindness. He was choosing his comfort over my dignity. I turned my eyes to my mother, Bernice. She was the matriarch, the one who enforced the rules of etiquette with an iron fist. Surely she would not let this stand. She adjusted the brim of her wide white hat and looked down at the mess on the deck. Her eyes were wide, but not with concern for me. They were filled with annoyance. She clicked her tongue against her teeth, a sound of pure irritation that I had known my entire life. Keisha, honestly, she said, her voice sharp and loud enough for every guest to hear, do not just stand there gaping like a fool. Grab some paper towels and clean this up immediately. Do you have any idea how much this hickory flooring cost your sister? That red dye in the velvet will stain if it sets. Hurry up before you ruin the aesthetic of the party. There it was, the hierarchy of my family laid bare in a single sentence. The wooden planks of the deck were worth more than my feelings. My sister's aesthetic was more important than my humiliation. I was not the guest of honor. I was not the graduate. I was the cleanup crew. I was the help. I felt a sharp tap against my ankle. I looked down. Brad, my brother-in-law, had extended his loafer and kicked my foot. It was not a hard kick, not enough to bruise, but it was enough to be a command. It was the way one might nudge a stray dog to move it out of a doorway. You heard your mother, Brad sneered, his face flushed with alcohol and arrogance. Get to scrubbing, Keisha, unless you want Leo to show you how to eat it first. I looked at Jasmine, my sister, the woman whose mortgage I paid. She sighed, fanning herself with a cocktail napkin, looking bored by the entire scene. Please, Keisha, just handle it, she said. You are making everyone uncomfortable with this drama. Not a single person said sorry. Not one guest intervened. My nephew Leo was still grinning, waiting for the show. The world seemed to slow down. The sounds of the party faded into a dull roar. A calmness washed over me, cold and absolute. It was the kind of calm that comes when you realize the house is already burned down and there is nothing left to save. I slowly bent down. I saw a flicker of triumph in Brad's eyes. He thought he had won. He thought he had broken me. He thought I was bowing down to scrape cake off the floor like a maid. My mother relaxed, thinking her order was being obeyed. I reached past the roll of paper towels Jasmine tried to shove at me. I reached into my purse and pulled out a silk handkerchief. With slow, deliberate movements, I wiped the red frosting off the toe of my shoe. I cleaned the heel. I made sure not a speck of cake remained on my leather. Then I stood up to my full height. I dropped the frosting-covered handkerchief right onto the pile of cake on the floor. I did not shed a tear. I did not scream. I did not ask for an apology I knew I would never get. I simply turned on my heel, the sound of my shoes sharp against the wood they cared so much about, and I walked through the sliding glass doors, through the house I paid for, and out the front door without looking back. I gripped the steering wheel of my battered Honda Civic until my knuckles turned white. The smell of red velvet and humiliation still clung to the air inside the car. I drove away from the sprawling suburban mansions of Buckhead, away from the manicured lawns and the judgmental eyes of the homeowners association. I drove toward the heart of Atlanta, where the skyline cut a jagged edge against the darkening sky. For years I had played a role. I was Keisha the struggler. Keisha the administrative assistant who needed help with rent. Keisha who drove a car with a dented bumper and wore clothes from the clearance rack. It was a costume I put on every time I visited my family, a shield that kept them from asking for even more than they already took. But as I pulled up to the valet stand of the Aurelia, one of the most exclusive high-rises in the city, the mask began to slip. The valet, a young man named Marcus, opened my door before the engine had even stopped sputtering. He did not look at the dented hood or the frosting on my shoes. He looked at me with the respect due to the owner of the building's most expensive unit. "Welcome home, Ms. Williams," he said smoothly. "Shall I have the car detailed tonight?" "Yes, Marcus, thank you," I said, handing him the keys. "And please make sure the interior is scrubbed. It smells like betrayal." I walked through the marble lobby. The concierge nodded. The elevator scanned my retina and whisked me silently to the 45th floor. The doors slid open directly into my foyer. This was my sanctuary. It was 3,000 square feet of Italian marble floor-to-ceiling glass and modern art that cost more than my parents' retirement fund. There were no mismatched chairs here, no scuffed floors, no screaming children. I kicked off my frosting-covered shoes right in the entryway, leaving them there like a crime scene relic. I walked barefoot across the heated stone floors to the kitchen. It was sleek and minimalist, a stark contrast to Jasmine's cluttered, showy new kitchen she had bragged about all afternoon. I opened the wine fridge. My fingers hovered over the bottles. I bypassed the casual blends and reached for a bottle of Chateau Margaux. It was a vintage I had been saving for a special occasion. Tonight seemed appropriate. It was the night I finally stopped being their daughter and started being their creditor. I poured a glass, the deep red liquid swirling like blood in the crystal. I walked to the edge of the living room where the glass wall offered a panoramic view of the city. Atlanta sprawled out beneath me, a grid of lights and power. From up here, the cars looked like toys. The people were invisible. The noise of the world was silenced by triple-paned glass. My sister had told me to eat off the ground. My brother-in-law had laughed at my poverty. My mother had treated me like a stain on her perfect reputation. They thought I went home to a cramped studio apartment to cry over my lack of worth. They had no idea that I was looking down on them from the sky. They were fighting for scraps of status in the suburbs while I owned the building. I took a sip of the wine. It tasted like iron and berries and cold, hard cash. I looked at my reflection in the glass. The sad, eager-to-please girl who just wanted her mother to say "well done" was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew exactly what everything cost and exactly who was going to pay. The city lights flickered below me, indifferent and beautiful. I was alone, yes. But up here in the silence, I realized that being alone was not the same as being lonely. It felt like power. The vibration of my phone against the glass coffee table sounded like a drill in the silent apartment. I knew who it was before I even looked. The group chat named The Inner Circle was blowing up. I took a sip of the Chateau Margaux, letting the expensive wine coat my tongue, fortifying myself against the poison I was about to ingest. I picked up the phone. The first message was a wall of text from my mother, Bernice. It was a masterpiece of gaslighting. "Keisha, your behavior today was beyond unacceptable. It was a disgrace. You embarrassed your sister in her own home. You embarrassed us in front of the Deacon and Brad's business partners. We have discussed this as a family, and we agree that your attitude has become toxic. You think because you have a little degree, you are better than us. You are not. Until you can learn some humility, do not come back to this house. We are cutting ties. Do not contact us until you are ready to apologize to Leo for ruining his fun and to Jasmine for disrespecting her hospitality. We need space from your negativity. I stared at the words. Toxic. Negativity. Disgrace. These were the words she used for the daughter who had secretly paid off her medical bills last winter so she wouldn't have to go on a payment plan. Then came the notification that Jasmine had reacted to the message with a heart emoji. She typed her own follow-up. And do not think you are coming to Thanksgiving unless you reimburse me for the deck cleaning. That red dye is going to be a nightmare to get out. You are so selfish, Keisha. Always making everything about you. Then Brad chimed in, the man who had laughed while his son treated me like a dog. Yeah, and while you are taking your little time out, do not forget the Capital One bill is due on the 15th. The statement balance is $4,000. Just transfer it to the joint account like usual. We do not want any late fees messing up my credit score. I read that last line 3 times. My credit score. Something inside my chest, a small, hopeful part of me that still wanted their approval, finally curled up and died. The pain didn't hit me like a wave. It hit me like a freeze. A cold, numbing sensation spread from my fingertips up my arms and settled into my heart. For 32 years, I had convinced myself that their hardness was just their way of loving me. I told myself they were tough on me because they wanted me to be strong. I told myself I supported them financially because that is what families do. I was wrong. I wasn't a daughter to them. I wasn't a sister. I wasn't even a person. I was a utility. I was a human ATM machine with a pulse. I was the safety net they walked on while they performed their high-wire act of pretending to be rich. They didn't care that I was hurt. They didn't care that I was humiliated. They only cared that the bill was paid on the 15th. They wanted to cut ties. They wanted to punish me with silence. They wanted to discard me until they needed a refill. I set the phone down on the marble table. I didn't cry. I didn't feel the urge to scream anymore. I felt lighter. It was the lightness of a burden being put down. They had handed me the scissors thinking I would use them to cut myself. They didn't realize I was going to use them to cut the strings. I looked out at the city lights of Atlanta burning bright and indifferent. They wanted space. I would give them the vacuum of space. I would give them a black hole where their money used to be. I walked into the master bedroom and approached the large, abstract painting hanging above my dresser. To anyone else, it was just a piece of art, but to me, it was the gatekeeper of my secrets. I slid the frame to the right, revealing a steel wall safe embedded in the concrete. My fingers danced over the biometric scanner. The heavy lock disengaged with a satisfying mechanical thud. Inside sat a thick leather binder. I pulled it out and carried it to my desk, the weight of it heavy in my hands. This binder contained the paper trail of my financial enslavement. I flipped it open to the first divider labeled Property. There it was, the deed to the house in Buckhead, the house where I had just been told to eat off the floor. My eyes scanned the signatures at the bottom. Brad's signature was a messy scrawl, but right next to it was mine, neat and precise. The memory hit me with the force of a physical blow. I was 25 years old, sitting at my parents' kitchen table. Brad had been denied a mortgage for the 3rd time. My mother was crying softly into a tissue while my father paced the room. Keisha, you are the only one with the credit score to save this, they had said. Brad just needs a leg up. The system is rigged against him, but you can fix it. If you do not sign this paper, your sister will be homeless. Do you want your nephew to grow up on the street? They had weaponized my loyalty. They had turned my competence into an obligation. I remembered holding the pen, my hand trembling. I remembered asking what would happen if Brad could not pay. My father had slammed his hand on the table and told me to stop being so pessimistic, to stop rooting against my own family. So I signed. I signed for the house. Then a year later I signed for the Range Rover because Jasmine needed a safe car for the baby. Then I signed for the business loan because Brad had a surefire investment tip. I turned the pages of the binder. Loan after loan, lease after lease. Millions of dollars of liability all resting on my shoulders. They called it helping family. I looked at the papers now under the cold light of my penthouse office, and I saw it for what it truly was. It was not help. It was theft. They had stolen my creditworthiness, my peace of mind, and my financial freedom to build a house of cards they lived in like royalty. I closed the binder with a snap. The nostalgia was gone. The guilt was gone. In their place was a cold, hard resolve. I opened my laptop and navigated to my bank's website. I did not go to the standard consumer login page. I went to the private wealth portal, the one reserved for clients with 8 figures in liquid assets. The screen loaded a sleek black interface with gold lettering. "Welcome, Ms. Williams." The dashboard populated. It showed my personal accounts, my investment portfolios, and then, at the bottom, the linked accounts. The accounts I managed for them. The accounts I fed every month like a life support system. I clicked on the tab marked Guarantor Status. The screen listed every single asset I had just reviewed in the binder. Next to each one was a small button that said, Revoke Liability. I hovered my mouse over the button for the mortgage. My mother's voice echoed in my head telling me I was toxic, telling me to stay away. "Be careful what you wish for, Mother," I whispered to the empty room. I was not just a daughter anymore. I was the bank. And the bank was closing for business. I sat in the glow of the laptop screen, the cursor blinking rhythmically like a heartbeat at the end of the text input field. My family's group chat was still active, a stream of vitriol and demands scrolling up the phone screen next to my computer. They were demanding apologies. They were demanding money. They were demanding my submission. For 32 years, I would have typed out a paragraph of excuses. I would have begged for forgiveness. I would have transferred the money just to make the notifications stop. Not tonight. I reached for my phone and typed a single message. My fingers moved with a steady, cold precision. Message received. I will respect your decision to cut ties. Since I am no longer considered family, I will no longer be acting as your financier. I am withdrawing from your lives, completely starting with the financial accounts. I did not add an angry emoji. I did not use exclamation points. I simply hit send. Then, before the inevitable explosion of replies could flood the screen, I set the phone to Do Not Disturb and turned my attention back to the laptop. The banking portal was waiting. The list of liabilities sat there, a digital representation of my own exploitation. The mortgage on the house in Buckhead, the lease on the Range Rover, the lease on the G-Wagon, the business loan for Brad's failing day trading firm. Next to each line item was a small, unassuming checkbox. I clicked the first box for the mortgage. A warning window popped up immediately, the text bright red against the black background. Warning: revoking guarantor status will trigger the acceleration clause. The lender will demand immediate payment of the full principal balance. If the primary borrower cannot refinance within 30 days, foreclosure proceedings will initiate. Do you wish to proceed? I remembered the day we signed the papers. I remembered my mother holding my hand telling me I was a good daughter. I remembered Brad making a joke about how I was finally useful for something. I moved the mouse. I clicked, yes. I moved to the car leases. Another warning. Warning. Removal of primary leaseholder will result in immediate repossession orders if the secondary driver does not qualify for independent financing. Brad had a credit score that wouldn't get him approved for a library card. I clicked yes. I went down the list one by one. The business loan, the credit cards, the personal lines of credit I had opened to cover their emergencies. Click, click, click. It was rhythmic. It was surgical. It was the sound of a guillotine blade dropping over and over again. Finally, I opened my email client. I composed a new message to my attorney, Mr. Sterling. The subject line was simple: execute decoupling protocol. The body of the email was brief. Please proceed with the immediate removal of my name from all co-signed assets listed in the attached file. File the necessary notices with the credit bureaus and the lenders by 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. Do not accept any calls from the secondary parties. Direct all communication to my office. I attached the spreadsheet. I pressed send. I sat back in my leather chair and listened to the silence of my penthouse. It was done. The digital signals were already racing through the servers, queuing up the destruction of their false reality. By the time they woke up to their artisanal coffee and their view of the golf course, the ground beneath their feet would already be gone. I closed the laptop with a soft snap. I picked up my glass of wine and walked to the window. The city of Atlanta lay spread out before me, a sea of lights, oblivious to the war I had just declared. I took a sip. It was the best glass of wine I had ever tasted. The morning sun hit the glass facade of the Sovereign Tower at exactly 8 o'clock. I walked through the revolving doors not as a sister or a daughter, but as an executioner in 6-inch Christian Louboutins. I was wearing a charcoal Armani suit that cost more than my brother-in-law made in 3 months. The security guard nodded at me with recognition. He knew who I was. The tellers knew who I was. But my family still thought I was a secretary who barely scraped by. I did not stand in line. I walked straight past the velvet ropes to the elevator marked private banking. When the doors opened on the top floor, the regional director, Mr. Henderson, was already waiting for me with a cup of black coffee and a look of concern. "Good morning, Ms. Williams," he said, ushering me into his corner office. "We received your digital request last night. Are you absolutely sure about this? These are aggressive measures." I sat down in the leather chair and crossed my legs. "I am sure. Initiate the separation protocols." He opened the file on his desk. It was thick. It contained the financial lifeblood of my entire family. "Very well. Let us start with the credit lines. You are the primary account holder on the American Express Platinum and the Chase Sapphire Reserve held by Brad and Jasmine." "Cancel them," I said. "Mark them as lost or stolen if you have to. Just cut the access immediately. Any transaction attempted after 8:15 a.m. should be declined." He typed into his terminal. "Done. Next, we have the auto loans. The leases for the Range Rover and the G-Wagon are in your name with them listed as authorized operators." "Revoke the authorization," I said, keeping my voice flat. "I want the repossession orders filed by noon. They are driving stolen cars as of this moment." Mr. Henderson paused, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Ms. Williams, I have to warn you. This will trigger a credit alert that will drop their scores by at least 100 points instantly. If they have any other financing pending, it will collapse." "That is the point," I said. "Do it." He hit the enter key. The sound was a soft click, but to me it sounded like a gavel coming down. "Now for the mortgage," he said, his voice lower. "You are the guarantor. If you withdraw, the bank is required to demand a full refinance within 30 days. Given the primary borrower's credit history, he will not qualify." I finished for him. "Brad could not finance a toaster oven without my signature. Send the notice of acceleration. Tell them they have 30 days to pay the full balance of $1.2 million or face foreclosure." Mr. Henderson looked at me over his glasses. He had seen me sign these papers years ago, seen me trying to help my sister build a life. He knew the history. "They hurt you, didn't they?" he asked softly. I stood up and smoothed out my suit jacket. "They didn't just hurt me, Mr. Henderson. They tried to erase me. I am just returning the favor." I walked out of the office as the printers began to whir, churning out the official notices that would end their world. I checked my watch. It was 8:30 a.m. Brad would be trying to pay for his power breakfast right about now. I put my sunglasses on and stepped into the elevator. The show was just beginning. At exactly 12:45 p.m., Brad was sitting at the premier table in the center of the dining room at the Capitol Grill in Buckhead. He was wearing a navy bespoke suit that I had paid for last Christmas. Across from him sat two potential investors he had been trying to close for months. They were discussing a buy-in of $200,000. Brad was leaning back, swirling a glass of 50-year-old scotch, looking every inch the successful financier he pretended to be. I imagine he was talking about liquidity and asset allocation concepts he barely understood and certainly did not practice. He signaled the waiter with a snap of his fingers, a habit I had always detested. "Check, please," he announced loudly enough for the neighboring tables to hear. When the leather folder arrived, he did not even look at the total. He simply slid the black American Express Platinum card, my card, the one I had authorized him to use for emergencies only, inside the folder, and pushed it across the white tablecloth. He kept talking to the investors, probably bragging about his summer plans or the new deck. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The conversation at the table began to lag. Brad frowned, looking around for the waiter. Finally, the young man returned. He was not holding the receipt. He was holding the card between two fingers, as if it were contaminated. "I am terribly sorry, sir," the waiter said, his voice low and discreet. The card was declined. Brad laughed, a loud, nervous bark of a sound. "That is impossible. There is no limit on that card. Run it again. You probably chipped the chip or something." "I have run it 3 times, sir," the waiter said, keeping his face perfectly neutral. "The code returned is do not honor. That means the account has been closed or suspended by the primary cardholder." The two investors exchanged a look. The air at the table shifted instantly from admiration to suspicion. Brad's face turned a deep shade of crimson. He snatched the card from the waiter's hand. "Excuse me one moment," he said. Standing up so abruptly he bumped the table, spilling water onto the pristine cloth. "My bank is notoriously overzealous with fraud protection. I just need to make a quick call to clear this up." He walked a few feet away near the wine cellar and pulled out his phone. "I know exactly what he did, because my phone logged the attempt at 12:58 p.m. He dialed my number. He was ready to scream at me, ready to demand I fix this, ready to bully me into submission like he always did. But he did not get me. He got one ring, and then the automated click of a blocked number. He pulled the phone away from his ear, staring at the screen in disbelief. He dialed again, straight to voicemail. He tried to text. Not delivered. I can only imagine the cold sweat breaking out on his forehead as he realized the truth. The bank was not overzealous. The bank was gone. The safety net he had bounced on for years had vanished. He had to walk back to that table. He had to look those two men in the eye, men he was trying to convince to trust him with their fortunes. He had to sit down, his hands shaking, and say the most humiliating words of his life. "Gentlemen, it appears there has been an administrative error with my accounts. I seem to have left my other wallet in the car. Would one of you mind covering this, and I will Venmo you immediately?" The lead investor stood up, buttoning his jacket. "That won't be necessary, Brad. We will cover the lunch. But I think we are going to pass on the investment opportunity. If you cannot manage your own liquidity, I do not think you should be managing ours." They threw a credit card on the table, paid the bill, and walked out, leaving Brad sitting alone with a declined piece of plastic and a glass of scotch he could no longer afford. While Brad was sweating through his bespoke suit at a lunch he could no longer afford, a different kind of storm was making landfall in Buckhead. My sister Jasmine was likely lounging on her white linen sofa, scrolling through Instagram and admiring the way the afternoon sun hit her new hickory floors. She had no idea that the foundation of her entire life had just been detonated remotely from a penthouse downtown. At exactly 2:15 p.m., a courier truck pulled into the driveway. It was not delivering a designer dress or a new gadget for Leo. It was delivering a thick, heavy envelope with the red stamp of the mortgage lender. Certified mail. Urgent. Jasmine probably signed for it with a huff of annoyance, wondering why I had not handled this paperwork like I handled everything else. She sliced it open with a silver letter opener I had bought her for her birthday. I can picture the exact moment the color drained from her face as she scanned the first paragraph. The legal jargon was dense, designed to intimidate, but the numbers were crystal clear. Notice of guarantor withdrawal and rate adjustment. The letter explained in cold, unfeeling terms that the primary financial guarantor, Ms. Keisha Williams, had formally severed liability for the property. Without my pristine credit score anchoring the loan, the bank's algorithm had immediately reassessed the risk profile of the mortgage. Brad's credit score, a dismal number that hovered in the low 500s due to his secret gambling debts and missed payments, had triggered a catastrophic default clause. The interest rate was not creeping up. It was exploding. The preferential prime rate of 3%, a rate I had fought tooth and nail to secure for them, was gone. In its place was the subprime penalty rate, 18.9%. Jasmine's eyes must have frantically darted to the bottom of the page, searching for the bottom line. For the last 5 years, their mortgage payment had been a manageable $4,000 a month, a figure I frequently subsidized when Brad had a slow month. Now the bold black text stared back at her like a death sentence. New monthly payment due. Immediately, $12,450. $12,000. The paper slipped from her fingers and fluttered to the floor, landing right on the spot where my red velvet cake had been smashed yesterday. That number was impossible. It was more than Brad made in 2 months. It was more than she made in a year of her part-time consulting gigs. It was a financial eviction notice. Panic, sharp and suffocating, clawed at her throat. She looked around her perfect living room at the custom drapery and the oversized art and saw it all dissolving. She realized with terrifying clarity that she did not own this life, she was just renting it from me. She grabbed her phone, her hands shaking so hard she dropped it once before unlocking the screen. She did not call her husband, she did not call our parents. She called me. She needed her fixer. She needed the sister she had called toxic. She needed the woman she had laughed at while I cleaned her floor. But the phone did not ring. There was no comforting dial tone, just a click. And then silence. The line was dead. The bridge was burned. She stood alone in her beautiful stolen house, and for the first time in her life, Jasmine screamed. Jasmine drove her Range Rover like a maniac to our parents' house. She did not even park properly in the driveway, she just abandoned the massive SUV on the lawn, leaving deep tire tracks in my father's prized Bermuda grass. She burst through the front door without knocking her face a mask of running mascara and sheer panic. "Mama, Daddy," she screamed, running into the living room, where Calvin and Bernice were watching their afternoon soaps. "She is trying to kill us. Keisha is trying to kill us." Bernice jumped up from her recliner, dropping her knitting. "Jasmine, what in the world is wrong with you? You look like you have lost your mind." Jasmine thrust the crumpled bank letter into her mother's hands. "She threw a tantrum, Mama. A real one. She cut us off. The bank wants $12,000 a month. $12,000. They are going to take the house. They are going to put us on the street. You have to stop her. You have to make her fix this." Calvin slowly stood up. He adjusted his suspenders and frowned. He was a man who prided himself on order and discipline, and this hysteria was an affront to his authority. Calvin took the letter from Bernice. He put on his reading glasses and scanned the document. His frown deepened into a scowl. "This is nonsense," he grumbled. "She cannot do this. She is the guarantor. That is a lifetime commitment. She is just acting out because she was embarrassed yesterday. It is a power play. A very disrespectful, childish power play." He pulled his phone from his belt clip. "I will handle this. I will tell her to call the bank right now and reverse this foolishness. She needs to understand that you do not play with family money." He dialed my number. He put the phone to his ear, expecting the familiar ring followed by my hesitant voice. He had prepared his opening line. He was going to tell me I was being ungrateful. He was going to demand an apology for upsetting my sister. But the phone did not ring. It went straight to a generic automated message. "The number you have reached is not accepting calls at this time." Calvin pulled the phone away and stared at it. He dialed again. Same result. He tried calling my office line, the one I had given him for emergencies only. It rang once and then disconnected. "She blocked me," he said. His voice was quiet, at first confused. She blocked her own father. Bernice gasped, clutching her chest. She would never. Keisha knows better than that. "Try again, Calvin. Maybe it is the signal. I am telling you, Bernice, she blocked me," Calvin roared, throwing his phone onto the sofa. The anger in his eyes was replaced by a flicker of something else. Fear. For 32 years, I had never said no. I had never hung up. I had never walked away. I was the constant. I was the doormat, and now the doormat was gone. Jasmine sank onto the floor, sobbing into her hands. "It is not just the house, Daddy," Brad called. "The credit cards are dead. The cars are being flagged." She is not just mad. She is waging war. Bernice looked at the letter again, her hands trembling. $12,000. "Calvin, we do not have that kind of money. If she does not turn this back on, Jasmine loses everything. And if Jasmine loses everything, where are they going to live?" The three of them looked around the modest living room. They realized with a dawning horror that their comfortable retirement was built on the assumption that I would always be there to subsidize the disasters. They realized that without me, they were just three people with expensive tastes and no way to pay the bill. "She is not playing games," Calvin whispered. "This is real. We have a problem. A very big problem." The vibration of my phone against the mahogany desk in my office was relentless. It sounded like an angry swarm of bees. My mother, realizing she had been blocked on every channel, had played her final and most desperate card. She had activated the prayer chain. She had called the church mothers. In the Black community, the church mothers are not just elderly women in big hats. They are the gatekeepers of reputation. They are the judge, jury, and executioner of social standing. And my mother had evidently spun a tale of woe so convincing that they were now descending upon my phone line with the wrath of the Old Testament. My screen lit up with notifications. Sister Mary sent a text saying, "Honor thy father and mother, Keisha. God does not bless disobedience." Deaconess Jones left a voicemail saying, "We are praying for your spirit, child. Greed is a sin. Do not let the devil use you to destroy your sister's home." They were flying monkeys. That is the clinical term for them. Enablers sent by the narcissist to do their bidding. They did not know the truth. They only knew the lie my mother had fed them. That I was ungrateful. That I was cruel. That I was abandoning my family over a petty grudge. I watched the phone ring again. The caller ID displayed a name that made me pause. Sister Patterson. Sister Patterson was the head of the usher board. She was a woman who could stop a whispering child with a single glare from across the sanctuary. She was also the biggest gossip in Atlanta. If you wanted news to travel faster than light, you told Sister Patterson. I picked up the phone. "Hello, Sister Patterson," I said, my voice cool and professional. "Keisha," she boomed, skipping the pleasantries. "I just got off the phone with your poor mother. She is in tears. She says you are putting your sister and that sweet baby Leo out on the street." "Oh. I have known you since you were in pigtails. I expected better from you. You need to fix this mess and apologize to your brother-in-law. He is a good man trying to provide for his family." I leaned back in my executive chair. I swiveled to look out the window at the Atlanta skyline. "A good man," I repeated. "Is that what my mother told you?" "That Brad is a good man. He is a member of the community," Sister Patterson said indignantly, "and he respects the church, unlike some people who seem to have forgotten where they came from just because they got a little money." I opened the folder on my laptop marked Brad. I scrolled past the bank statements and the foreclosure notices until I found the subfolder labeled Group Chat Screenshots. Brad had a group chat with his college buddies. He thought it was private. He didn't know that he had left his iPad logged in at my apartment 6 months ago, and I had seen everything. I had screenshotted months of conversations where he mocked my family, mocked my culture, and specifically mocked the church. "Sister Patterson," I said, my voice dropping an octave, "before you continue lecturing me about respect, I want to send you something. I want you to see exactly what this good man thinks of you and the usher board." "What are you talking about?" she asked, her tone suspicious. "Check your messages," I said. "I just sent you a screenshot." I hit send. The image was a conversation from last Easter. Brad had posted a photo of Sister Patterson in her famous wide-brimmed purple hat. The caption underneath, written by Brad, read, "Look at these clowns." It looks like a circus for old hags. Can't believe I have to pretend to respect these loud-mouthed idiots just to keep the gravy train rolling. The pastor looks like a pimp in a polyester suit. I heard the silence on the other end of the line. It was a heavy, thick silence. I could hear Sister Patterson breathing. I could hear the sound of her reading glasses clicking as she adjusted them. I waited. 1 second. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. He called me a hag, she whispered. Her voice was trembling. Not with sadness, but with a rage so pure it could burn down a building. He called Pastor Harris a pimp. Yes, ma'am, I said. And if you look at the date, that was the same Sunday you cooked him that pot roast he said he loved. The line went dead. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't hang up. She simply ended the call. I put the phone down and smiled. I didn't need to do anything else. My mother had sent the church after me, but she had forgotten one thing. The church does not like being mocked by an outsider, especially not a white son-in-law who was living off their daughter's money. I knew that within 5 minutes Sister Patterson would forward that screenshot to every deacon, usher, and choir member in the state of Georgia. The flying monkeys were not coming for me anymore. They were turning around, and they were flying straight for Brad. I watched the delivery status on my phone screen turn from sent to read. The blue check marks appeared one by one, a digital firing squad lining up against my mother's reputation. I had not just sent the screenshot to Sister Patterson. I had forwarded it to the entire prayer circle group chat that my mother had added me to years ago, hoping their daily scriptures would fix my attitude. Now I was using their network to fix her reality. Across town in the living room I had paid to furnish, my mother Bernice was likely sitting with a smug smile, waiting for me to call back, begging for forgiveness. She probably had tea steeping ready to lecture me about the importance of family unity. Her phone began to ring. It was the special ringtone she assigned to the church leadership, a sound that usually made her straighten her posture and fix her hair, even though no one could see her. She picked it up on the first ring. "Hello, Sister Patterson," she would have said, her voice dripping with honey. "I hope you got through to Keisha. We are just so worried about her spiritual state." But she did not get honey in return. She got vinegar. I could imagine the sound of Sister Patterson's voice booming through the receiver loud enough that she did not even need speakerphone. "Bernice, you have a lot of nerve sending me to do your dirty work while you harbor a wolf in your house," Sister Patterson shouted. Her voice was trembling with the righteous indignation that only a church elder can summon. My mother must have stuttered, confused. "Sister, I do not understand." "What wolf?" "Your son-in-law," Patterson snapped. "That man you sit in the front pew with every Sunday. That man who eats my potato salad and smiles in my face. I am looking at a picture right now, Bernice. A picture where he calls me a hag. He calls the choir a circus. He calls this holy congregation a group of idiots," my mother gasped. "No, sister. That is a mistake. Brad loves the church. He respects you. Do not lie to me." Bernice Patterson cut her off. "The proof is right here in black and white. It is from his phone. Your daughter Keisha sent it. And let me tell you something else. If you think you are bringing him to the revival next week, you are mistaken. We do not break bread with mockers. And as for you letting a man speak that way about the people who prayed you through your sickness, shame on you. Do not call me. Do not come to the usher board meeting. We are done." The line went dead. Before my mother could even lower the phone, it rang again. It was Mrs. Wallace from the choir. Then Deacon Jones. Then the pastor's wife. The phone did not stop ringing. It was a cascade of rejection. My mother looked at Jasmine, who was sitting on the sofa filing her nails. Jasmine looked up, seeing the blood drain from our mother's face. "Mama, what is it?" Jasmine asked. "Is it Keisha?" "It is Brad," my mother whispered, her hands shaking. "The church knows. They know what he said about them. They are canceling the luncheon, Jasmine. They are uninviting us from the gala." Jasmine frowned. "What did he say? It could not be that bad." My mother held up the phone, her eyes wide with horror. "He called them a circus, Jasmine. He insulted the hand that feeds our social standing. We are finished in this town." At that moment, Brad walked into the room looking for his car keys, oblivious to the fact that he had just torched the only community that tolerated him. He saw their faces and frowned. "What is with the long faces?" he asked. "Did the bank call again?" My mother looked at him, and for the first time in years, she did not see a golden ticket. She saw a liability. She saw the man who had just cost her the one thing she valued more than money, her reputation. And outside on the street, the sound of a tow truck backing up began to beep, signaling that the bad news was only just beginning. Brad was cruising down the tree-lined streets of Buckhead in the matte black Mercedes G-Wagon I had leased in my name 3 years ago. The windows were down, and he was blasting rap music, trying to look like the mogul he desperately pretended to be. He was on his way to the Cherokee Town and Country Club for a 2 o'clock tea time with the same group of investors who had witnessed his credit card decline earlier that day. In Brad's delusional mind, he probably thought he could smooth everything over with a few jokes and a good round of golf. He thought the car was his armor. He thought the heavy German engineering protected him from the reality of his bank account. I was sitting in my office 45 floors up, watching a small blue dot move across the map on my iPad. It was the GPS tracker built into the vehicle's security system. I took a sip of sparkling water and tapped the icon labeled Asset Recovery. A menu popped up with several options, including Locate Locked Doors and the one I had been waiting to use for a decade. It was labeled Report Unauthorized Use. I selected the option. A confirmation box appeared asking if I wanted to alert local law enforcement and authorize immediate towing. I pressed confirm. 3 miles away, Brad saw the blue lights flashing in his rearview mirror. He sighed, annoyed. He probably thought he was being pulled over for speeding, or maybe for the expired tags he was supposed to renew last month. He pulled the massive SUV over to the shoulder, right in front of the entrance to the golf course. He checked his hair in the rearview mirror, put on his best winning smile, and rolled down the window, ready to charm his way out of a ticket. But the officer did not walk up to the window with a notepad. He stepped out of his cruiser with his hand resting on his holster. He did not smile. He did not ask for license and registration. "Step out of the vehicle, sir," the officer shouted. "Keep your hands where I can see them." Brad's smile vanished. He sputtered, indignant. "Excuse me. This is a misunderstanding. I am a member of this club." "Step out of the vehicle now," the officer repeated, his voice leaving no room for argument. "We have a report that this vehicle is being operated without the owner's consent." Brad stumbled out of the car, his face pale. "That is crazy. My wife's sister owns this car. I have permission. I drive this every day." "Not anymore, sir," the officer said. "The owner flagged it as unauthorized 10 minutes ago. You are driving stolen property." As Brad stood on the side of the road trying to explain himself, a flatbed tow truck pulled up behind the police cruiser. It was not a polite tow truck. It was a repossession rig, loud and aggressive. The driver didn't even talk to Brad. He just hopped out, hooked the chains to the undercarriage of the G-Wagon, and started the winch. The sound of the metal grinding was deafening. It drew attention. Cars entering the golf club slowed down to watch. Brad's friends, the investors he was supposed to meet, drove past in a silver Porsche. They slowed down. They rolled down their windows. They saw Brad standing on the grass, hands shaking, being questioned by police, while his status symbol was hoisted into the air like a piece of junk. Brad looked at them. They looked at him. Then they shook their heads, rolled up the window, and drove through the gates, leaving him behind. The G-Wagon was secured. The tow truck driver hopped back in the cab and drove away, taking Brad's golf clubs, his ego, and his ride home with him. Brad was left standing on the curb, in his expensive golf cleats, with no car, no friends, and no way to leave. He reached into his pocket for his phone. He did not call a taxi. He called me. This time I answered. My phone rang again. It was not Brad this time. It was Jasmine. The caller ID flashed her name like a warning siren. I let it ring 3 times. I wanted her to sweat. I wanted her to imagine I was too busy living my life to care about hers. Finally, I swiped the green button and brought the phone to my ear. I did not say hello. I just breathed. Keisha. The scream was so loud I had to pull the device away from my ear. You petty, jealous, miserable witch. Brad just called me. He is walking down the side of the highway. He is carrying his golf bag on his shoulder because the police would not let him leave it in the car. Do you have any idea what you have done? He is humiliated. The neighbors are going to see him walking home like a vagrant. I spun my chair around to face the window of my office. The air conditioning was humming a low, steady rhythm that contrasted perfectly with my sister's hysteria. I spoke softly, forcing her to stop screaming just to hear me. I did not do anything, Jasmine. I simply corrected a clerical error. Unauthorized drivers are a liability. I am sure you understand. Liability is a very dangerous thing. Fix this, Jasmine shrieked. Fix it right now. Call the tow company. Tell them it was a mistake. Send an Uber for him. Send a limo. I do not care what you do, but get him off the street before someone we know sees him. He is a vice president, Keisha. He cannot be seen sweating on the side of the road. A vice president, I repeated, letting the words roll around in my mouth. A vice president who needs his sister-in-law to co-sign a lease because his credit score is lower than his golf handicap. That does not sound like a vice president to me, Jasmine. That sounds like a dependent, and I am tired of claiming you all on my taxes. There was a pause on the line, a heavy, stunned silence where I could hear Jasmine gasping for air. Then her voice dropped low, trembling with a mix of rage and fear. You are enjoying this, aren't you? You are enjoying watching us suffer. You are sick. What is he supposed to do, Keisha? It is 90 degrees out there. He is thirsty. He is tired. What do you want me to tell him? I closed my eyes, and for a split second I was back on her patio. I saw my red velvet cake smashed on the wood. I saw my nephew sneering. I saw Brad laughing, holding his beer while I wiped frosting off my shoes. The memory was sharp and clear. Tell him to keep walking, I said, my voice ice cold. And if he gets hungry or thirsty, tell him to look down. Tell him to eat off the ground like a dog. I did not wait for her reaction. I did not wait for the gasp or the next string of insults. I pressed the red button and ended the call. The silence rushed back into the room, instant and absolute. I looked at my phone. Block. I tossed it onto the desk, one down. But the real game was only just starting. Brad stumbled through the front door of the house in Buckhead looking like a man who had walked through a hurricane. His navy suit was stained with sweat and road dust. His face was a mask of red, blotchy rage. He kicked the door shut behind him with enough force to rattle the windows in their frames. Jasmine was waiting for him in the foyer. She was pacing back and forth on the hardwood floors, clutching her phone like a lifeline. When she saw him, she did not run to comfort him. She ran to accost him. "Where have you been?" she screamed. "The bank has called 3 times. They are threatening to foreclose." The neighbors saw the tow truck, Brad. They saw everything. How are we going to fix this? Brad walked past her without a word. He went straight to the liquor cabinet in the living room. His hands were shaking so badly, he could barely unscrew the cap of the vodka bottle. He did not bother with a glass. He took a long, burning swig straight from the bottle and slammed it down on the counter. "Shut up, Jasmine," he growled. "Just shut up for 1 second. You are worried about the neighbors. You are worried about the car. You have no idea what is actually happening." Jasmine froze. She saw the terror behind his anger. She saw the way his eyes darted around the room as if he were looking for an exit that did not exist. "What do you mean, Brad?" she whispered. "What is actually happening?" Brad slumped onto the white sofa, burying his face in his hands. "It is over, Jasmine. The whole thing. It is all over." He looked up and his eyes were wild. "I need $500,000 by Friday. If I do not get it, I am not just losing the house. I am going to federal prison." Jasmine gasped, clutching her throat. "Prison? What are you talking about?" "I borrowed it," Brad said, his voice rising in hysterical self-defense. "I borrowed money from the client escrow accounts. It was just temporary. I was going to put it back as soon as the market turned. I had a system, Jasmine. I moved money from account A to cover account B, and when I needed to plug the gaps, I used Keisha's money. He stood up and started pacing, pointing a shaking finger at the ceiling. It worked perfectly for 3 years, he shouted. I paid the returns. Everyone was happy. But then your psychotic sister decided to pull the plug. She canceled the credit cards. She revoked the loans. She cut off my liquidity. Do you understand what she did? She stopped the cash flow. Jasmine stared at him. You stole money. I did not steal it, he insisted, his face twisting. I managed it. I was leveraging assets to maintain our lifestyle, to buy you this house, to buy you those clothes, to put Leo in private school. I did it for us. And I would have gotten away with it if Keisha had just stayed in her lane. She killed us, Jasmine. She looked at my accounts today. I know she did. That is why she cut us off. She wants to see me in handcuffs. He grabbed Jasmine by the shoulders. His grip was painful. The auditors are coming on Monday. If that money is not back in the escrow account by Friday close of business, they will see the whole. They will call the FBI. We lose everything. The house, the cars, my freedom, everything. Jasmine began to hyperventilate. Her perfect world was dissolving into a nightmare of indictments and jail cells. We have to fix it, she cried. We have to get the money. We cannot get a loan, Brad spat. My credit is ruined. Your credit is maxed out. We have no assets. The cars are gone. The house has no equity because of the interest rate hike. He looked at her, and a dark, desperate idea formed in his eyes. There is only one person with that kind of money, he said softly. One person who owes us. One person who caused this mess. Keisha Jasmine whispered. Brad nodded slowly. She has perfect credit. She has millions in assets. Her signature is as good as gold. If we can just get access to her credit line for 48 hours, I can fix the books. I can save us. But she blocked us, Jasmine said. She will never give us the money. Brad's expression hardened into something cold and calculating. Then we do not ask her, he said. We take what we are owed. We are family, Jasmine. She is obligated to save us from the disaster she created. We just need her signature. And I know exactly how to get it. The air in the living room was thick enough to choke on. My parents, Calvin and Bernice, sat on the white linen sofa that was now technically owned by the bank. Brad paced back and forth in front of the fireplace, his face a sheen of sweat and terror. Jasmine sat at the dining table, her head in her hands, looking at the mountain of final notice letters. We are out of options, Brad said, his voice cracking. I called everyone. No one will lend me a dime. My credit score is tanked. The auditors are coming in 4 days. If I do not have that money, I am going into federal custody. Do you understand? I am going to jail. My father Calvin shook his head slowly. He looked old and defeated. Lord have mercy. We cannot have a scandal like that. The church would never let us live it down. A convict in the family. It would kill your mother. My mother. Bernice sat up straighter. She smoothed the skirt of her dress. Her eyes were not filled with fear. They were filled with a cold, calculating resolve. She looked at Brad, then at Jasmine. Stop whining, she said sharply. We are not going to jail. And we are certainly not losing our standing in the community because Keisha decided to throw a tantrum. But Mama, we need $500,000, Jasmine sobbed. Keisha blocked us. She shut down the accounts. We have nothing. Bernice stood up and walked over to the table. She placed her hand on Jasmine's shoulder. Keisha has plenty, Bernice said. She is swimming in money. She lives in a penthouse while we struggle. She drives luxury cars while her brother-in-law walks on the highway. Do you think that is fair? Do you think God wants her to hoard that wealth while her family suffers? No, Jasmine whispered. Exactly, Bernice said. She owes us. I birthed her. I raised her. You protected her when you were kids. We made her who she is. If she wants to play games and cut us off, then we have to take what is rightfully ours. She looked at Brad. You said her signature is as good as gold, right? Brad stopped pacing. He looked at Bernice. Yes, with her name I could get a bridge loan from a private lender in 24 hours. No questions asked. Then do it. Bernice said. Brad blinked. But she will not sign it. She does not have to sign it, Bernice hissed. She leaned in close, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. She is your sister Jasmine. You have seen her handwriting 1,000 times. You have her old birthday cards. You have the lease agreements she signed for you. Jasmine looked up, her eyes wide with shock. Mama, you want me to forge her signature? That is a crime. It is not a crime, it is survival, Bernice snapped. It is an advance. We are just borrowing it. Once Brad fixes the accounts and the market turns around, we will pay it back. She will never even know. And even if she finds out, what is she going to do? Put her own mother and sister in jail. She does not have the stomach for that. She is weak. She always has been. Brad rushed to the home office and came back with a stack of papers. It was the loan application. He placed a pen in front of Jasmine. He also placed an old Christmas card I had sent them, my signature clear and elegant at the bottom. Do it, Brad urged, his desperation making him shake. Just trace it a few times. You can do this, baby. You are saving our family. Jasmine looked at the pen. She looked at the eviction notices. She looked at our mother, who nodded encouragingly. Do it for Leo, Bernice said softly. Do not let your son see his father in handcuffs because you were too scared to do what was necessary. Jasmine picked up the pen. Her hand hovered over a piece of scratch paper. She looked at my signature on the card, then slowly, she began to copy it. The first attempt was shaky. The second was better. By the 10th time, she had perfectly replicated the curve of the K and the loop of the S. That is perfect, Brad whispered. Jasmine looked up, a dark resolve settling over her face. She pulled the loan document toward her. She pressed the pen to the paper and signed my name. I was sitting in my corner office on the 45th floor of the city of Atlanta, looking like a circuit board of gold and silver lights below me. I was in the middle of a high-stakes video conference with the board of directors of a failing airline. We were discussing a restructuring plan that would save 3,000 jobs. My mind was sharp-focused and entirely in its element. This was where I belonged, in the world of logic, numbers, and consequences. Then my personal phone vibrated against the mahogany desk. It was not a text message or a call. It was a haptic pulse, a specific urgent rhythm that I had programmed for only one app: Sentinel Prime. It was my elite identity theft protection service, the kind that costs $5,000 a year and monitors the dark web, credit bureaus, and banking systems in real time. I apologized to the board members, muted my microphone, and turned off my camera for a brief moment. I picked up the phone. The screen was flashing red. Critical alert. New credit inquiry detected. High-risk lender Shark Bridge Capital. Loan amount $500,000. Applicant Keisha Williams. Status pending verification. I stared at the numbers. $500,000. It was a bridge loan, the kind with predatory interest rates that desperate people took when no legitimate bank would touch them. I did not need a loan. I had enough liquid cash in my checking account to buy a small island. There was only one reason an application like this would exist. Someone was pretending to be me. I tapped the Details tab. The app provided the metadata of the application. Submission time 3 minutes ago. Submission IP address residential. Location Buckhead, Georgia. I knew that IP address. I had set up the Wi-Fi router myself 5 years ago. It was my parents' house. The realization hit me like a splash of ice water. They had done it. They had actually crossed the line from emotional abuse to federal crime. They were sitting in my mother's living room, probably right now, forging my signature on a digital document. I could picture them. Brad sweating through his shirt, Jasmine holding the pen with shaking hands, and my mother encouraging them, telling them it was owed to them. They thought I was stupid. They thought I was just the quiet administrative assistant sister who paid the bills and looked the other way. They had no idea that my financial life was fortified like a military base. They had just tripped a silent alarm, and they were standing in the middle of the bank vault with the die packs exploding in their hands. I felt a cold, hard rage settle in my stomach. This was not just a betrayal. This was an act of war. They were trying to destroy my credit, my reputation, and my financial future, just to save Brad's neck. They were willing to burn me down to keep themselves warm. I did not click deny immediately. If I blocked it now, they would know I was watching. They might try something else, something harder to trace. I needed the trap to snap shut completely. I needed the application to go through the initial processing so there would be a paper trail, a trail that led directly to a felony indictment. I took a screenshot of the alert. Then I opened my secure email and forwarded the data to my private investigator with a simple subject line. They took the bait. I put the phone down and turned my camera back on. The board members were waiting, looking anxious. "Apologies, gentlemen," I said, my voice smooth and professional. "I just received a notification about a security breach. But do not worry. The intruders have been identified and containment protocols are already in effect. Let us proceed." I went back to saving the airline. But in the back of my mind, I was already writing the opening statement for the district attorney. They wanted my money. They were going to get a cell block instead. I sat across from Mr. Blackwood, the private investigator I kept on retainer for corporate background checks. Usually we were looking for hidden bankruptcies or criminal records for potential CEOs. Today the subject was much less impressive, but far more toxic. Brad. Blackwood slid a manila envelope across my glass desk. He did not look happy. In his line of work, that usually meant he had found something truly rotten. "You were right about the embezzlement," Blackwood said, his voice gravelly. "He has been skimming from his clients for years. But that is not where the money went. He is not a gambling addict, Ms. Williams, and he is not a bad investor. He is just a liar." I opened the envelope. The first photo made my stomach turn. It was Brad, but he looked different. He was wearing casual clothes, laughing, pushing a stroller in a park I did not recognize. Next to him was a woman. She was young, maybe 25, with long blonde hair. She looked nothing like my sister Jasmine. "Who is she?" I asked, picking up the photo. "Her name is Tiffany," Blackwood replied. "She lives in a condo in Midtown. A condo that was purchased 2 years ago with a down payment that matches the exact amount you loaned Brad for his failing business startup." I flipped through the rest of the photos. Brad at a birthday party for a toddler. Brad carrying groceries into the condo. Brad kissing Tiffany on the cheek. "He has a child," I whispered. "A son," Blackwood confirmed. 2 years old. And here is the kicker. Look at the bank statements on page 4. I turned the page. It was a transaction history for an account under a shell company name. I recognized the incoming transfers immediately. They were from me. Every time Brad had come to me with a sob story about payroll, or a market crash, or an unexpected tax bill, I had transferred money to this account. And look at the outgoing transfers, Blackwood pointed. Daycare, pediatrician bills, Saks Fifth Avenue, a lease on a Lexus. He was not losing my money. He was spending it. He was using my hard-earned cash, the money I worked 80-hour weeks for, to play house with another woman while my sister sat at home worrying about their mortgage. He was living a double life fully funded by the sister-in-law he despised. "Does Jasmine know?" I asked, though I already dreaded the answer. Blackwood pulled out another sheet of paper. It was a call log. "She knows something," he said. "There are dozens of calls between Jasmine and a divorce attorney 6 months ago." But then they stopped. And look at this text exchange from last week. I read the printout. It was from Brad to Jasmine. It read, "I promise it is over. I am doing this for us. Just help me get the money from Keisha one last time, and I will fix everything. We can start fresh." Jasmine knew. She knew he was cheating. She might not know about the child or the extent of the theft, but she knew he was a liar. And instead of leaving him, instead of protecting herself, she had decided to help him rob me. She had chosen her abuser over her sister. She had decided that maintaining the illusion of her marriage was worth destroying my life. I felt a coldness settle deep in my bones. I had thought they were just greedy. I had thought they were just entitled. But this was evil. This was a level of depravity I had not calculated for. I closed the file. My hands were steady. Keep digging, I told Blackwood. I want everything. I want the birth certificate. I want the lease on the condo. I want the receipts for every diaper and every diamond earring he bought her with my money. Blackwood nodded and stood up. What are you going to do with it? I looked at the photo of Brad playing the doting father on my dime. I am going to give him a family reunion, I said. One he will never forget. Jasmine pulled her white Range Rover into the parking lot of the bland suburban office park where she believed I worked. She adjusted her designer sunglasses and checked her makeup in the rearview mirror. She was on a mission. She needed to confront me. She needed to scream at me until I fixed the mess she and Brad had created. She needed to find the cowardly sister who had blocked her calls and vanished. She walked into the reception area of Henderson Logistics, the mid-level shipping company where I had been an executive assistant 5 years ago. She marched up to the front desk, her heels clicking loudly on the cheap tile floor. I need to see Keisha Williams, Jasmine announced, not bothering with a greeting. Tell her it is her sister, and it is an emergency. The receptionist, a young woman with bright blue braids, looked up from her computer. She frowned, confused. Keisha Williams, the receptionist repeated. I am sorry, ma'am, but there is no one by that name here. Jasmine scoffed. Do not lie to me. She has worked here for 5 years. She sits in the back near the break room. Just go get her. The receptionist typed something into her computer. I have the employee directory right here. We do not have a Keisha Williams. Jasmine slammed her hand on the desk. This is ridiculous. She is an administrative assistant. She probably answers to Mr. Henderson. Oh, you mean the old CEO, the receptionist said, realization dawning on her face. Mr. Henderson retired 4 years ago. The company was bought out. Most of the old staff left. Jasmine blinked. Retired. But Keisha goes to work every morning. She complains about her boss. She talks about filing reports. I do not know what to tell you. The receptionist shrugged. The last record I see for a Keisha Williams is from 5 years ago. It says she resigned to pursue higher education. Jasmine stared at the girl. Resigned. 5 years ago. The floor seemed to tilt beneath Jasmine's feet. For 5 years she had listened to me talk about work. She had complained to me about her job while I nodded and sympathized. She had borrowed money from me, assuming it came from my overtime pay at this dreary little office. She walked out of the building in a daze. She sat in her car and tried to process the information. If I did not work here, where did I go every day? Where did the money come from? She realized with a sickening jolt that she did not know the name of my current company. She did not know my title. She did not know my address. She had never asked. In all our conversations, it had always been about her house, her marriage, her son. She pulled out her phone and searched my name on LinkedIn. She had never bothered to look before. The profile loaded. Keisha Williams, Ph.D., Managing Partner, Titan Crisis Management Group. Jasmine scrolled down. Featured in Forbes Under 40 Under 40. Keynote speaker at the Global Economic Forum. She looked at the photo. It was me, but not the me she knew. I was wearing a suit that cost more than her wedding dress. I was standing in a corner office with a view of the entire city. She dropped the phone into her lap. She had been treating a shark like a goldfish. She had been stealing from a millionaire and calling her a charity case. And now she had just forged the signature of one of the most powerful crisis managers in the city. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at her throat. She wasn't just in trouble. She was out of her league. And she had absolutely no idea where I was. Jasmine had paid $50 to an online skip tracer to confirm the address she found on LinkedIn. The result had led them here to the Sovereign Tower, the tallest and most intimidating skyscraper in Atlanta. It was a fortress of blue glass and steel that housed hedge funds, international law firms, and the city's elite. They pulled up to the curb in a rental sedan because Brad's credit cards had been declined at the luxury car rental agency. The 4 of them spilled out onto the sidewalk like a clown car of desperation. Brad was wearing a wrinkled shirt, his face slick with sweat. Jasmine looked manic, her eyes darting around as if expecting paparazzi. Calvin and Bernice looked like they were marching to a funeral they intended to disrupt. They were unified by one thing: rage. They pushed through the revolving doors into the lobby. It smelled of expensive leather and old money. The ceilings soared 30 feet high and the air was hushed and cool. Men in bespoke suits whispered into phones, and women in power heels walked with purpose. My family looked like tourists in a war zone. Calvin adjusted his tie. He was used to commanding respect in his small church, and he assumed his authority extended to the corporate world. He marched up to the security desk, which looked more like the command center of a spaceship. "I am here to see my daughter Calvin," announced his voice echoing in the quiet space. "Keisha Williams. Tell her to come down immediately. We know she is in there." The security guard, a man whose neck was wider than Brad's head, did not even look up from his monitor. "Do you have an appointment, sir?" "I am her father," Calvin shouted, slamming his hand on the marble counter. "I do not need an appointment. She is a low-level employee here. Just call her extension and tell her she is in trouble. Tell her if she does not come down here right now, we are going to cause a scene she will never live down." Jasmine chimed in, her voice shrill and piercing. "Stop protecting her. We know she is hiding. She stole money from us. She abandoned her family. We are not leaving until she comes down here and faces us." People in the lobby stopped to stare. A group of Japanese investors paused near the elevators. Brad, seeing an audience, decided to play the victim. He threw his arms wide, addressing the room at large. "She has committed fraud," Brad yelled. "She ruined my business. She is a thief. We just want justice. Is this the kind of person you employ here? A woman who lets her nephew starve?" The security guard finally looked up. His expression was bored. "Sir, if you do not lower your voice, I will have you removed. We have no record of a low-level employee named Keisha Williams." Bernice stepped forward, tears already streaming down her face. "Please, she just answers the phones. Check the directory again. We just want to talk to our baby. She is confused. She needs her mother." The guard tapped his screen. "I am looking at the directory. Ma'am. The only Keisha Williams in this building is Dr. Williams on the 45th floor, and you certainly do not have clearance to see her." Dr. Williams. Jasmine laughed a hysterical, jagged sound. "That is a joke. My sister barely finished community college. She is a liar. Just let us up. I bet she is hiding in the break room making coffee." Brad tried to push past the turnstile. "That is it. I am going up there myself. I am going to drag her out by her hair if I have to." That was a mistake. Two more guards materialized from the shadows. They blocked Brad's path. The lead guard put a hand on his taser. "Sir, step back," the guard commanded. "You are trespassing." "We are not trespassing, we are family," Calvin bellowed. "Call the police. I dare you. Let them come. We will tell them everything she did." They were making a scene just as they had planned. They thought the embarrassment would force me to come down and pay them off. They thought I was cowering under a desk upstairs, terrified that my boss would find out about my trashy family. They had no idea that upstairs I was watching the high-definition security feed on a 60-inch monitor, sipping an espresso. I watched them scream. I watched them shove. I saw the desperation in their eyes. I pressed the intercom button on my desk phone. "Send them up," I said to the head of security. "Bring them to the boardroom. Let us finish this." The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime that echoed through the cavernous marble lobby. My family turned in unison, expecting to see a cowering secretary in a cheap skirt suit. They were ready to bully the girl they remembered, the one who stuttered when she was yelled at. Instead, they saw me. I stepped out of the private executive elevator, flanked by two junior associates who were furiously taking notes on tablets. I was wearing a white bespoke power suit that cost more than the sedan they had rented. I held a file in my hand and I did not look down. I looked straight ahead with the cold indifference of a general surveying a battlefield. The atmosphere in the lobby shifted instantly. The security guards who had been blocking my family stepped back and snapped to attention. The receptionist stood up. The concierge stopped mid-sentence with a delivery driver and bowed his head. "Good afternoon, Ms. Williams," the concierge said, his voice projecting clearly across the silent room. "Your car is ready for the airport, and the board of directors sent over the champagne you requested for closing the merger deal. Shall I have it sent to the penthouse?" My father Calvin let out a nervous, confused laugh. He stepped forward, his hands out. "Excuse me, son, you are mistaken. This is my daughter. She works in administration. She answers the phones. She does not close merger deals." The concierge looked at my father with a mixture of pity and disdain. "Sir, this is Dr. Keisha Williams. She is the managing partner and majority shareholder of Titan Crisis Management. She owns the lease on the top 3 floors of this building. She is not administration. She is the boss." The silence that fell over my family was absolute. It was the silence of a worldview shattering. Jasmine looked at me. Her eyes traveled from my Italian heels to the diamond studs in my ears to the way the staff looked at me with fear and respect. The math was finally adding up in her head. The mortgage payments, the luxury cars, the tuition. It had never been a struggle for me. It had been pocket change. "You own the company," Jasmine whispered, her voice trembling. "You lied to us." "I did not lie," I said, stepping closer to them until I could smell the fear radiating off Brad. "You never asked. You assumed I was beneath you because it made you feel superior. You assumed I was poor because you needed me to be poor. You took my money for 10 years and never once asked where it came from because you were too busy spending it." Brad stepped forward, his face a mask of red, blotchy rage. "This is fraud. You tricked us. You let us believe we were doing you a favor by letting you be part of our lives. Doing me a favor?" I laughed, and the sound was sharp enough to cut glass. "You were bleeding me dry. But the vein is tapped out, Brad." I turned to the head of security. "Mr. Henderson, please remove these trespassers from my building. If they return, call the police and file harassment charges. And make sure their photos are distributed to all entrances. They are permanently banned." "But Keisha, my mother," Bernice cried, reaching out a desperate hand. "We are your parents. You cannot throw us out like trash." I looked at her hand, the hand that had taken my money and then texted me to stay away forever. "I do not have parents," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "I have liabilities, and I just liquidated them." I turned my back on them and walked toward the glass doors. Behind me, I heard the scuffle as security grabbed Brad by the arms. I heard Jasmine screaming my name. I heard my father shouting about respect. But for the first time in my life, I did not stop. I walked out into the bright Atlanta sun, and I let the doors close on their noise. The courier arrived at the rental house at 9 a.m. sharp. It was not a regular mail carrier. It was a private messenger in a dark suit, holding a thick linen envelope stamped with the logo of Sterling and Associates. Brad signed for it with a trembling hand. He knew that logo. It was the most expensive law firm in the city, the kind that did not handle traffic tickets or petty lawsuits. They handled corporate executions. Brad carried the envelope into the kitchen. The rental house was small and smelled of stale coffee. Jasmine was still asleep in the back room, exhausted from crying. Brad sat down at the wobbly table and stared at the package. It felt heavy, like it contained a bomb. In a way, it did. He tore open the seal. There was no polite cover letter. There was no legal jargon. There were just 3 items. The first was a photograph. It was 8 by 10 high resolution and printed on glossy paper. It showed Brad sitting on a park bench in Midtown. He was laughing, his head thrown back in genuine joy. Next to him sat a young blonde woman named Tiffany. On Brad's lap sat a 2-year-old boy who had his nose in his chin. The date stamp in the corner was from 3 days ago. Brad felt the blood drain from his face. He stopped breathing. He had been so careful. He had used burner phones. He had used shell accounts. But there it was, his secret life captured in vivid color. He pushed the photo aside, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Underneath the photo was a document. It was a photocopy of the loan application to Sharkbridge Capital. The application Jasmine had filled out. The application that bore my forged signature. Highlighted in neon yellow was the IP address log tracing the submission directly to the Wi-Fi router in my parents' house. Next to it was a sworn affidavit from a handwriting expert confirming that the signature was a forgery. The third item was a single sheet of heavy cream-colored stationery. It was typed in a crisp, elegant font. Mr. Thompson. The evidence before you is currently being held in a secure digital vault. A duplicate copy has been prepared for delivery to the Fulton County District Attorney's Office, the Fraud Division of the FBI, and your wife, Jasmine. You have two choices. Option A, you continue to lie. You continue to play the victim. In exactly 24 hours, I will release the full dossier. You will be indicted for bank fraud, identity theft, and embezzlement. The photos of your second family will be sent to Jasmine, your church, and every business associate you have left. You will go to prison, and you will go alone. Option B. You confess. You will call a gathering. You will admit to the embezzlement. You will admit to the forgery. You will admit that you coerced my sister into committing a felony. You will sign a full confession notarized and witnessed. If you choose option B, I will withhold the photos of Tiffany and the child. I will not send them to Jasmine. I will allow you to keep one shred of your life intact for the sake of the innocent child involved. You have until tomorrow night. The clock started when you signed for this package. Sincerely, Dr. Keisha Williams. Brad dropped the letter. He looked at the kitchen walls, which seemed to be closing in on him. He looked at the bedroom door where his wife was sleeping, the wife he had betrayed and manipulated into becoming a criminal. He realized then that I was not just angry. I was a grandmaster playing chess, and he was just a pawn who had already been captured. I held his freedom in one hand and his marriage in the other. He grabbed the vodka bottle from the counter. It was empty. He threw it across the room, smashing it against the wall. He screamed a raw, guttural sound of a man who knows he is trapped. He had no money, he had no allies, and now he had a deadline. He looked at the phone. He had to make the call. He had to set the stage for his own destruction. Because the alternative was not just prison, it was total annihilation. He picked up his phone and dialed my mother. Bernice, he croaked, his voice sounding like it belonged to a dead man. Get everyone together, we need to talk. The rental house felt like a bomb shelter. The air was stale, recycled, and thick with the scent of impending doom. My parents, Calvin and Bernice, sat at the small kitchen table, their posture rigid. Jasmine sat next to them, her eyes red and swollen, clutching a tissue. Brad stood in the center of the room, the ultimatum letter crumpled in his fist. He did not show them the photo of his mistress. He did not show them the photo of his secret child. He slid those into his back pocket. He only showed them the threat. She is going to the FBI. Brad said, his voice shaking with a mix of fear and adrenaline. She is giving us 24 hours to confess. She wants me to sign a paper admitting to everything. She wants us to go to the police station and turn ourselves in. Bernice gasped, clutching her pearls. Turn ourselves in? Like common criminals? We cannot do that. The shame would kill me. The church would never let us back in. Calvin looked at the table. We did forge the signature, Bernice. We did take the money. Maybe we should just throw ourselves on the mercy of the court. Maybe Keisha will show leniency if we do what she asks. Leniency? Jasmine snapped, her head snapping up. Her eyes were wild. Did you see her in that lobby, Daddy? Did you see the way she looked at us? She does not have an ounce of mercy in her body. She wants to destroy us. If we sign that confession, we lose everything. The house, the cars, our freedom. I am not going to prison, Daddy. I am not wearing an orange jumpsuit. Brad saw his opening. He leaned forward, his eyes manic. We do not have to go to prison. he whispered. We just need to buy time. She said she has a duplicate copy ready to send right. But she has not sent it yet. She is waiting for us to break. She thinks we are weak. What are you saying? Brad Bernice asked. I am saying we call her bluff, Brad said. We have the 10-year anniversary party scheduled for Saturday night, the all-white party. Every major investor in Atlanta is invited. We have commitments for over $2 million in new capital. But we cannot host a party, Calvin said. The house is in foreclosure, we have no catering, we have no money, we have the deposit. Brad lied. He did not have a deposit. He was planning to write bad checks. We host the party. We collect the investment checks from the guests. We cash them instantly. And then we run. Run, Jasmine whispered. We leave the country, Brad said. We go to a non-extradition country, Belize or Brazil. We take the money and we start over. We live like kings. And Keisha can send her little letters to whoever she wants, but we will be gone. Jasmine looked at her husband. She knew he was lying about something. She knew there were pieces of the puzzle he was hiding, but she also knew that the alternative was poverty. The alternative was admitting that her little sister had won. She stood up. She wiped her eyes. Her face hardened into a mask of desperate resolve. We are not canceling the party, Jasmine said. We are going to throw the biggest, most luxurious event this city has ever seen. We are going to wear white. We are going to smile. And we are going to take their money. Bernice nodded slowly. She liked the sound of that. It sounded like winning. God helps those who help themselves, she muttered. They did not know that I was listening. They did not know that the burner phone Brad was using had been compromised by my investigator days ago. I heard every word. I sat in my office and watched the audio waveform dance on my screen. They were not going to confess. They were going to commit one final massive fraud. They were going to throw an all-white party on the grave of their reputation. I picked up my phone and dialed my assistant. Get my stylist on the phone, I said. I need a dress for Saturday. What color, Ms. Williams? She asked. Red, I said. Blood red. Because I am not going there to celebrate. I am going there to end it. The mansion in Buckhead was glowing like a pearl against the dark night sky. It was Saturday night and the 10-year anniversary. All-white party had begun. From the street, you would never know that a foreclosure notice was taped to the back door or that the electricity was only running because Brad had rigged a generator in the shed to bypass the smart meter I had shut off remotely. Jasmine stood at the top of the grand staircase looking down at the foyer. She was wearing a floor-length white silk gown that hugged every curve. It was a custom design she had charged to a credit card that was already $3,000 over the limit. Around her neck hung a diamond necklace that was a high-quality cubic zirconia replica of the one she had pawned 2 days ago to pay the caterer's cash up front. She took a deep breath, smoothing her hair. This was her stage, this was her performance, and she had to sell it. Downstairs, the house was filled with the elite of Atlanta. Doctors, lawyers, politicians, and the wealthy church members. My mother had managed to smooth things over with using lies about a misunderstanding. Everyone was dressed in pristine white linen and chiffon. The room looked like a cloud. It smelled of expensive perfume and desperation. Jasmine descended the stairs, putting on a smile that was bright enough to blind. She floated through the crowd, accepting kisses on the cheek and compliments on her home. Oh, this old thing, Jasmine laughed, waving a hand at the crystal chandelier. We are actually thinking of tearing it down and building something more modern next year. Brad has been doing so well in the international markets, we need more space for his art collection. She moved to the next group, clutching a glass of champagne she was too nauseous to drink. Yes, Leo is starting at the prep school in the fall, she lied to a group of mothers. We just felt the public schools could not keep up with his advanced intellect. We are looking at summer homes in the Hamptons, too. It is so hard to find good waterfront property these days, isn't it? Brad was in the corner working the room with the frantic energy of a drowning man. He had a glass of scotch in one hand and a stack of brochures in the other. He was cornering a retired surgeon, pitching him on a guaranteed 20% return. Just write the check tonight, Doc, Brad said. slapping the man on the back. Get in on the ground floor. I am doing this as a favor to you because you are family. The surgeon looked skeptical, but he reached for his checkbook. Brad's eyes lit up with a hunger that was terrifying to watch. My parents, Calvin and Bernice, were holding court near the buffet table. They were eating shrimp cocktails and telling the pastor that I was currently in a mental health facility in Switzerland. Poor Keisha Bernice sighed, wiping her mouth. The stress of her little job just broke her. We are paying for the best care money can buy, of course. They were all complicit. They were all dancing on the edge of a volcano, convinced that if they just danced fast enough, the lava wouldn't catch them. They raised their glasses. They toasted to 10 years of love. They toasted to prosperity. They had no idea that the red dress was already in the car, and the car was turning onto their street. The double doors of the mansion swung open with a heavy, resonant thud that cut through the low hum of jazz music and polite chatter. The crowd turned, expecting another late arrival in linen or silk. What they saw silenced the room instantly. I stood in the doorway, framed by the night. I was not wearing white. I was wearing a floor-length gown of deep blood-red satin. It was a dress designed for a gala or a funeral, depending on how you looked at it. The color was violent against the sea of pale fabrics in the room. It was a scream in a library. It was a declaration of war. I did not come alone. Flanking me on the left was Sheriff Miller, a man known for his zero-tolerance policy on white-collar crime. On my right were two agents in dark windbreakers with the yellow letters IRS emblazoned on the back. Behind us stood a team of uniformed officers, their faces grim. Brad dropped his glass. It shattered on the marble floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot. The scotch splashed onto the pristine white hem of an investor's wife standing nearby. She gasped, but no one moved to help her. Every eye was fixed on me. I took a step forward, my heels clicking on the tile with a slow, deliberate rhythm. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. I walked straight toward the center of the room, where Jasmine stood frozen, her hand clutching her diamond necklace. "Good evening, everyone," I said, my voice projecting clearly without a microphone. "I apologize for the interruption. I know the dress code was white, but I thought red was more appropriate for a crime scene." Jasmine found her voice. It was thin and reedy. "Keisha, what are you doing here? Get out. This is a private party." "It was a private party," I corrected. "Now it is a federal raid." The IRS agents moved forward, fanning out into the crowd. They began to secure the exits. One of them walked straight to the buffet table and picked up a shrimp cocktail, examining it as if it were evidence. Sheriff Miller stepped up beside me. He looked at Brad, who was trying to edge toward the back door. "Mr. Bradley Thompson," he boomed, "do not move. You are being detained for questioning regarding multiple counts of wire fraud, bank fraud, and tax evasion." The room erupted into whispers. The investors Brad had been courting pulled their checkbooks back into their pockets. My mother Bernice clutched Calvin's arm, her face a mask of pure terror. "Keisha," baby Bernice cried, stepping forward. "Please do not do this. Think of the family. Think of Leo." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had told me to stay away forever. "I am thinking of the family, Mother," I said. "I am thinking about how you helped them steal my identity. I am thinking about how you sat in this house and planned to send me to jail for your debts." I reached into my clutch and pulled out a single piece of paper. It was the foreclosure notice. And as for this house, I continued holding it up for the room to see. "You are trespassing. The bank took possession at 5 p.m. yesterday. I bought the deed at 9 a.m. this morning." Jasmine screamed, a sound of pure primal loss. "You bought my house." "It is not your house," I said. "It never was. It was always mine. I just finally decided to move in." I signaled to the sheriff. He nodded. The officers moved in on Brad. The party was over. The reckoning had begun. Brad lunged toward me, his face contorted with a mixture of fear and rage that made him look like a cornered animal. "Get out!" he screamed, spitting saliva as he pointed a shaking finger at the door. "You have no right to be here." This is my house. This is my party. Security, get her out of here now. He looked around frantically for the private security guards he had hired for the night, but they were nowhere to be found. They had quietly stepped aside when Sheriff Miller walked in because smart mercenaries know better than to interfere with federal agents. Brad was alone. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I simply held up a small black remote control. It was the master controller for the AV system Brad had installed to show off his investment portfolio slides. I had hacked into the network 10 minutes before I walked through the door. "You want me to leave, Brad?" I asked. My voice amplified by the microphone I had taken from the stunned DJ. "I will leave, but first I think your investors deserve to see the real portfolio." I pressed the button. The massive LED screen behind the stage, which had been displaying a loop of Brad's logo, flickered and went black. A hush fell over the room. Then a grainy black and white video appeared. It was footage from a hidden camera inside my parents' living room. The date stamp in the corner was from 3 days ago. The image showed Brad and Jasmine sitting at the kitchen table. Brad was holding a pen over a document. Jasmine was crying. "Just trace it, Jasmine." Brad's voice boomed through the speakers, clear and undeniable. "Stop shaking. We need that money. If we do not get that loan, we go to jail. Just copy her signature. Keisha is too stupid to check her credit report anyway." The crowd gasped. I saw a woman in the front row cover her mouth with her hand. Jasmine on the screen looked up at Brad. "But what if she finds out? What if she sends us to prison?" "She won't send us to prison," Brad sneered on screen. "She is weak. She is just a glorified secretary. We take the money, we fix the books, and she never knows. Now sign the paper." I watched real-life Jasmine standing in the middle of her party as she watched herself commit a felony on a 20-foot screen. Her legs gave out. She collapsed onto the marble floor, her white dress billowing around her like a parachute. I pressed the button again. The video cut to audio. It was a recording from Brad's burner phone taken just yesterday. "As soon as the checks clear, we run," Brad's voice said. "We take the $2 million from the anniversary party and we hit the Cayman Islands. These idiots in Atlanta will never see a dime. We just need to smile and pour them expensive champagne and they will sign their life savings away. They are sheep, Jasmine. Rich, stupid sheep." The audio ended. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the kind of silence that happens right before an explosion. I looked at the crowd. I looked at the doctors and the lawyers and the business owners who had been drinking Brad's champagne 5 minutes ago. They were not sheep, they were sharks, and they looked hungry. Brad stood frozen on the stage. He looked at the screen, then he looked at the crowd. He opened his mouth to speak, to spin another lie, but no sound came out. I lowered the microphone. "Enjoy the presentation, everyone," I said. "I believe the Q&A session is about to begin." I stepped off the stage and watched as the first investor walked up to Brad and punched him square in the jaw. The room was buzzing with the chaotic energy of a riot about to break out. People were shouting and security was trying to separate the angry investor from Brad. But I was not finished. I tapped the remote one last time. The screen flickered. The grainy footage of the forgery disappeared. In its place, a high-resolution photograph filled the 20-foot wall. It was a picture of domestic bliss. A handsome man pushing a stroller in Piedmont Park, a beautiful young woman with blonde hair laughing at something he said, a toddler eating an ice cream cone. The man was Brad. But the woman was not Jasmine. And the child was not Leo. The room went quiet again. This was not financial crime. This was personal. This was the kind of scandal that made people stop fighting and start filming. I saw a sea of phones go up in the air. Facebook Live, Instagram stories, TikTok. The downfall of the Thompson family was being broadcast to the world in real time. Jasmine was still on the floor, her white dress spread around her like a puddle of milk. She looked up at the screen. She blinked, trying to make sense of the image. She knew that shirt Brad was wearing. She had bought it for him. She knew that park. But she did not know the woman. "Who is she?" Jasmine whispered. Her voice was barely audible over the hum of the projector. I stepped closer to her. I wanted her to hear me. I wanted her to know exactly what her loyalty had bought her. Her name is Tiffany, I said into the microphone. She lives in a 2-bedroom condo in Midtown, a condo that was purchased 2 years ago with a down payment of $50,000. Jasmine looked at me. Her eyes were unfocused. 50,000. The exact amount I loaned Brad for his business startup. I continued. He did not invest it in the market, Jasmine. He invested it in her. He has been paying her rent with your mortgage money. He has been buying her diamonds with the cash I sent for Leo's tuition. You were forging signatures to save a marriage that ended 3 years ago. Brad wiped the blood from his lip. He looked at the screen, then at his wife. He did not deny it. He couldn't. The evidence was 40 feet wide and glowing in high definition. Jasmine made a sound that I will never forget. It was not a scream. It was a low, keening wail like an animal caught in a trap. She scrambled to her feet. She did not look at me. She looked at Brad. She looked at the man she had stolen, for the man she had lied, for the man she had destroyed her sister for. "You spent my sister's money on her!" she shrieked. She lunged at him. Her manicured nails raked across his face. She was a whirlwind of white silk and fury. The guests gasped and stepped back, making room for the spectacle. The live stream comments were scrolling so fast they were a blur. I watched them fight. I watched the perfect couple, the envy of the church, the stars of the country club, tear each other apart on the dance floor. I felt nothing, no pity, no joy, just the cold, hard satisfaction of a balance sheet finally zeroing out. They wanted a show, I thought. They wanted to be the center of attention. Well, now they are. The brawl on the dance floor ended not with a bell, but with the heavy hand of the law. Sheriff Miller stepped into the fray, his deputies pulling Jasmine off of Brad. She was sobbing hysterically, her makeup streaked down her face like war paint. Brad was bleeding from a scratch on his cheek, his suit torn, his dignity non-existent. He tried to straighten his tie, trying to regain some semblance of the arrogant executive he pretended to be. He looked at the sheriff and tried to laugh it off. "Officer, thank you for stepping in." Brad panted. "My wife is clearly having a breakdown. I think we need to get her some help. Maybe call an ambulance." Sheriff Miller did not smile. He did not call an ambulance. He reached for his belt and unclipped a pair of steel handcuffs. They caught the light of the chandelier gleaming with a cold, hard promise. "Mr. Thompson, turn around and place your hands behind your back," the sheriff said, his voice booming over the whispers of the crowd. Brad froze. "For what? I am the victim here. She attacked me. You are under arrest," Sheriff Miller continued, ignoring Brad's protest. "We have a federal warrant for your arrest on 12 counts of wire fraud, 4 counts of money laundering, and 3 counts of tax evasion." The IRS agent stepped forward. One of them held up a tablet displaying a warrant. "Mr. Thompson, we have traced over $2 million in embezzled client funds moving through your accounts. We also have evidence of a fraudulent loan application submitted 3 days ago with a forged signature." Brad's eyes bulged. He looked at the handcuffs. Then he looked at Jasmine, who was being held back by a deputy. The realization hit him. He was going down, and he was not going to go quietly. It was her. Brad screamed, pointing a shaking finger at Jasmine. "She did it. She signed the papers. I told her not to. I told her it was wrong, but she insisted. She said her sister owed us the money. She forged the signature, Sheriff. Check the handwriting. It matches hers, not mine." The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the room, a husband throwing his wife to the wolves in real time. Jasmine stopped crying. She stared at him, the man she had lied for, the man she had stolen for, the man she had just found out was using her money to support another family. He was betraying her again, this time to save his own skin. "You liar!" Jasmine shrieked. "You told me to do it. You said we would go to jail if I didn't. You handed me the pen, Brad. I did no such thing," Brad yelled as the sheriff spun him around and slammed him against the wall. I am an honest businessman. My wife is the criminal. She is obsessed with money. She is jealous of her sister. She did this. Arrest her, too. The sound of the ratcheting handcuffs cut through his screams. Click, click, click. It was a rhythmic, mechanical sound that signaled the end of Brad's life as a free man. Sheriff Miller hauled Brad upright. "You have the right to remain silent," the sheriff said, "and I strongly suggest you use it because right now you are digging your grave with your mouth." As they dragged Brad toward the door, he kept screaming, blaming Jasmine, blaming me, blaming the economy. I watched him go. I watched the man who had kicked my foot and told me to eat off the floor being dragged out of his own party like a common thug. I took a sip of champagne. It tasted like victory. The sound of the sirens faded into the distance, taking Brad and his lies with them. The ballroom was silent, except for the soft sobbing of Jasmine, who was still crumpled on the floor. My parents, Calvin and Bernice, stood over her, looking like they had aged 20 years in 20 minutes. The guests were frozen, unsure whether to leave or stay for the finale. They were looking at me, expecting an explanation, expecting mercy. I walked to the center of the room. My red dress swished around my ankles like liquid fire. I picked up the microphone one last time. "Attention, everyone," I said, my voice echoing in the sudden quiet. "I have one final announcement before you leave. I know many of you are wondering about the venue. You are wondering how a couple in foreclosure could afford to host such a lavish event." I looked down at Jasmine. She looked up at me, her eyes red and puffy. She looked pathetic. But I remembered the way she had laughed when Leo threw my cake. I remembered the way she had forged my signature. "The answer is simple," I continued. "They couldn't. This house, the one you are standing in, has been in foreclosure for 6 months. The bank seized the property yesterday afternoon at 5 p.m. A murmur went through the crowd. People looked around at the marble columns and the crystal chandeliers, suddenly realizing they were standing in a repossessed shell. "But do not worry," I said, a small smile playing on my lips. "The bank did not want to deal with the hassle of an auction. They wanted a quick sale. So they called their most trusted investor. Someone with liquidity. Someone who pays cash." I reached into my clutch and pulled out a deed. It was fresh, the ink barely dry. "I bought the house," I announced. "I closed the deal 1 hour ago. This is not Brad's house. This is not Jasmine's house. This is my house." Jasmine gasped, clutching her chest. "You bought it." "Yes, Jasmine," I said. "I own the roof over your head. I own the floor you are sitting on. And I have a very strict policy about guests." I looked at the crowd. "The party is over. You have 5 minutes to vacate the premises. Anyone remaining after that will be trespassing on private property." And unlike my brother-in-law, I do not make idle threats. The guests did not need to be told twice. There was a scramble for the exits. Women grabbed their purses, men grabbed their jackets, and within minutes the room was emptying out. I looked at my parents. Calvin was shaking his head, muttering to himself. Bernice was staring at me as if I were a stranger. "You too," I said to them. "Get out!" "But Keisha," Bernice cried. "Where are we supposed to go? This was our retirement plan. We sold our house to pay Brad's legal fees last month. We have nowhere." I looked at her without pity. "You should have thought about that before you tried to rob me. You should have thought about that before you told me to eat off the floor." I pointed to the door. "Leave. Take your daughter and your grandson and get out of my house." They scrambled to gather their things. Jasmine stumbled to her feet, supported by Calvin. They walked toward the door, heads bowed, defeated. They were leaving the life they had stolen, and they were walking into a future of poverty and shame. I watched them go. I stood in the center of my new empty mansion and listened to the sound of the front door closing. It was the sound of a chapter ending. It was the sound of silence. And it was beautiful. The silence in the ballroom was deafening. The last guest had scurried out like a cockroach when the lights turned on, leaving only the wreckage of my family behind. Jasmine was sobbing on the floor, a heap of ruined white tulle and misery. But my parents did not go to her. They came to me, they ran to the winner, to the. Bernice grabbed the hem of my red dress. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes, usually so cold and critical, were wide with raw panic. "Keisha, baby, please," she wailed. "You cannot do this. You have made your point. Brad is gone. He is going to jail. Isn't that enough blood for one night? Do not throw your sister out on the street. She has nowhere to go. We sold our house, Keisha. We gave it all to Brad for his legal fees because we thought this investment was real. If you kick her out, you are kicking us out too. We will be homeless." Calvin tried to stand tall, but he looked like a man made of ash. "Daughter," he said, his voice trembling, "mercy is a virtue. The Bible says to forgive those who trespass against us. You have won. Do not be cruel. Let us stay here until we figure this out, just for a few weeks, for the family." I looked down at them. For 32 years, I would have given anything for them to look at me with this much intensity. I would have paid any price for their attention. Now I had it, and it was pathetic. I stepped back, pulling my dress out of my mother's grip. I smoothed the fabric. "Do not quote scripture to me, old man," I said, my voice flat and hard. "Not while you are standing in a house you tried to help steal. You talk about mercy. Where was your mercy when I was begging you to love me? Where was your mercy when you watched your grandson treat me like a dog and laughed? Where was your mercy when you helped them draft a plan to send me to prison for your debts?" Bernice wiped her face, her makeup smearing into a grotesque mask. "We made mistakes, Keisha. We are human. But Jasmine, she was just scared. She did what Brad told her. She is a victim too. She did not know what she was doing." I laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound that echoed off the high ceilings. "A victim? Is that what you call her? I call her a co-conspirator. And you know what else I call you, Mother? An accomplice." They froze. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I leaned in closer so they could see the absolute lack of sympathy in my eyes. "Did you think I did not know? Did you think I missed the part where you sat at that kitchen table and told her to trace my signature? I heard the recording, Mother. I heard you tell her to do it for Leo. I heard you say I was too weak to fight back. I heard you encourage her to commit a felony against your own daughter because you felt entitled to my money." Bernice turned the color of old milk. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "You heard that," she whispered. "Every word I said. And so did the district attorney. You did not just watch a crime happen. You solicited it. You encouraged it. In the eyes of the law, that is conspiracy to commit fraud. My lawyer, Mr. Sterling, is already drafting the paperwork. He will be contacting you on Monday morning. Not to invite you to brunch, but to serve you with a subpoena. You are going to be deposed. You are going to answer for every lie, every theft, and every moment you chose them over me." Calvin grabbed Bernice's arm to steady her. "You would send your own parents to jail?" he asked, horrified. "I am not sending you anywhere," I said, turning away. "You sent yourselves the moment you picked up that pen. Now get your daughter and get out of my house before I have you arrested for trespassing too." The clock is ticking. The ballroom was emptying out, but the sound of weeping remained. It came from the bottom of the grand staircase. Leo, the 10-year-old boy who had shoved my cake onto the floor with such arrogant glee just days ago, was now curled into a ball on the marble step. He was sobbing. His designer tuxedo was rumpled, and his face was buried in his knees. He looked small. He looked terrified. He was watching his father being shoved into a squad car through the open front door. I looked at my sister. Jasmine was still on the floor a few feet away, clutching the hem of her ruined dress. She was not looking at her son. She was not trying to comfort the child who was watching his world collapse. She was rocking back and forth, muttering about her reputation, about the neighbors, about the unfairness of it all. Even in her darkest moment, she was the center of her own universe. She did not see Leo. She only saw her own reflection in the shattered glass of her life. This was the final straw. This was the moment I knew I had to make the hardest call of the night. I could destroy their finances. I could take their house. But I could not leave a child in the wreckage of their narcissism. I signaled to a woman standing quietly by the entrance near the sheriff. She was dressed in a sensible gray suit holding a clipboard. Mrs. Vance from Child Protective Services. I had called her 3 hours ago when the evidence of the embezzlement and the instability of the household became undeniable. I had prepared a file for her too. Mrs. Vance stepped forward, flanked by 2 officers. She walked past me and knelt down in front of Jasmine. "Ms. Thompson," she said, her voice calm but authoritative. "I am taking emergency custody of Leo. Based on the arrest of his father and your current lack of housing and stability, we have determined that he is at immediate risk." Jasmine's head snapped up. Her eyes bulged. "You are taking my son. You cannot take him. He is all I have left." "You do not have him, Jasmine," I said, stepping into her line of sight. "You never did. You used him as a prop. You taught him to be cruel. You taught him that money was more important than character. And right now you are sitting on the floor crying about a house while your son is traumatized 5 feet away. You are unfit." Jasmine scrambled to her knees, reaching out to me. "Then you take him, Keisha. You take him. You have this big house. You have money. You take him. He is family. Do not let strangers take him. Raise him for me until I get back on my feet." I looked at Leo. He lifted his head and looked at me. His eyes were red. There was a flicker of hope there. He thought his rich aunt was going to save him. He thought he could just switch mansions and keep living the lie. I looked back at Jasmine. I thought about the years of abuse. I thought about the toxicity that ran through their veins like poison. If I took him, I would be tied to them forever. I would become his new enabler. I would be the crutch they leaned on by proxy. "No," I said. My voice was soft, but it was final. "I will not take him." Jasmine gasped. "But you have to. You are his aunt." "I am his aunt," I agreed. "I am not his mother. And I am not a rehabilitation center for broken children. He needs deprogramming, Jasmine. He needs to unlearn everything you and Brad taught him. He needs a fresh start with people who will teach him value, not price. He needs a foster family who will love him enough to tell him no." I nodded to Mrs. Vance. She stood up and walked over to Leo. She spoke to him gently, offering him a hand. He looked at me one last time, waiting for me to intervene. I did not move. I stood like a statue in my red dress and watched him stand up. "You are a monster," Jasmine screamed as they led her son away. "You are heartless." I watched the heavy oak door close behind Leo, shutting out the night. "I am not heartless," I whispered to the empty room. "I am just the only one who loved him enough to let him go." The heavy front doors of the mansion slammed shut with a sound like a guillotine blade dropping. Jasmine stood shivering on the concrete driveway. Her custom white silk gown, the one she had pawned her fake jewelry to afford, was now a ruined rag. It was stained gray at the hem from the dirty floor and splattered with red wine from the chaos inside. She looked like a ghost of the life she had tried so desperately to fake. She had no coat. She had no purse. She had no car keys because the repo trucks had already come and gone. Beside her stood my parents, Calvin and Bernice. My father, who had always walked with the chest-puffing swagger of a man who believed he was chosen by God, now looked like a pile of old laundry. He slumped against the stone pillar of the gate, clutching a plastic grocery bag that held the few personal items security had allowed him to take. My mother, the woman who had spent 30 years terrorizing me with her demands for aesthetic perfection, was weeping openly. Her expensive hat was askew, and her makeup had melted into a mask of black streaks. They were not just displaced for the evening, they were destitute. The full weight of their financial decisions was crashing down on them in real time. To fund Brad's legal defense last month, they had taken a predatory second mortgage on their own paid-off home. To pay for the catering deposit for this party, they had liquidated their retirement accounts. They had bet every single penny they had on the lie that Brad would close a big deal and pay them back. Now Brad was in a federal holding cell, and their assets were frozen as part of the investigation. I watched them from the library window on the second floor. I stood in the dark, holding a glass of vintage champagne, looking down at the driveway. I saw my father pull out his phone, probably to call a hotel. I knew what would happen. His credit cards would be declined, his bank accounts were locked. They had zero liquidity. Jasmine looked up at the house. She saw me standing in the window. I did not hide. I did not wave. I just stood there in my red dress, a silent witness to their ruin. I saw her mouth open in a scream of frustration, but the thick glass silenced her. She looked at the mansion she had pretended to own and realized she would never step foot inside it again. They began to walk. 3 figures in formal wear trudging down the long driveway toward the public road. There was no luxury SUV waiting for them. There was no Uber Black. They were walking into the darkness with nothing but the clothes on their backs. They had spent their lives trying to look down on me from a pedestal built on debt and lies. Now they were on the ground, and it was a long, cold walk to the bottom. The Gulfstream G650 climbed steeply into the night sky, leaving the lights of Atlanta far below. The cabin was quiet, a sanctuary of cream leather and polished walnut. I sat in seat 1A, my favorite spot. The flight attendant, a discreet woman named Elena, who knew my preferences by heart, set a crystal flute on the table. "Krug Grand Cuvée Ms. Williams," she said softly. "Just as you requested." "Thank you, Elena," I replied. "I will not be needing anything else for a while." She nodded and disappeared into the galley, leaving me alone with the hum of the engines and the black velvet of the sky outside my window. I picked up my phone one last time. The screen was still lighting up with notifications, though fewer now. The initial wave of rage from my family had turned into a desperate, pleading whimpering. Bernice had sent a text 3 minutes ago. "Keisha, please. We are at a motel on the highway. Your father is having chest pains. We just need a little money for a deposit on an apartment. We will pay you back. We promise. We love you, baby girl." Love. It was a word they used like a currency devalued and counterfeit. They loved my money. They loved my compliance. They loved the way I made their lives effortless. They did not love me. If they had, they would not have needed to be evicted to remember my name. I scrolled up to the contact for Bernice. I clicked info. I scrolled down to the bottom of the screen where the red text waited. "Block this caller." My thumb hovered over the button. For a second, just a split second, I felt a pang of guilt. It was the old programming, the deep-seated training that told me my only purpose was to serve them. But then I remembered the cake. I remembered Leo's laugh. I remembered my mother telling me to clean the floor. I pressed the button. I did the same for Calvin, for Jasmine, even for the old number Brad used to call me from. Block, block, block. It was done. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full. It was full of possibility. It was full of peace. I set the phone down on the table and picked up the champagne. The bubbles rose in a steady golden stream. I looked out the window. Below me, the world was small. The drama, the betrayal, the noise of my former life. It was all just a speck in the rearview mirror. I was flying toward the Maldives, toward turquoise water and white sand, and a villa that stood on stilts over the ocean. I was flying toward a future where I answered to no one. I raised the glass to my reflection in the dark window. The woman looking back at me was not the same woman who had walked into that backyard barbecue. That woman was dead. She had died on the floor of her sister's deck. The woman in the window was new. She was harder, yes. But she was also whole. "To graduation, Keisha," I whispered. "You finally passed the test." I took a sip. The champagne was cold and perfect. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the plane carry me away into the night. This story serves as a powerful reminder that sharing DNA does not grant a license for abuse. Keisha's journey illustrates that true power lies in self-respect and financial independence. For years, she allowed her generosity to be weaponized against her, but she ultimately learned that we teach people how to treat us. The narrative demonstrates that setting boundaries is essential for survival. When kindness is met with constant cruelty and exploitation, the healthiest choice is often to sever ties completely. Being alone is far better than being surrounded by people who only value you for what you provide. Hit the like button if you agree that peace is more important than toxic loyalty. And subscribe for more stories about reclaiming your power.